I'm drawing infinite cards in Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 476, A Gem That Is Not a Gem, Ether Particles. God's Domain, Asgard Hall. The glorious main hall made of gold was silent, only Odin on the throne of the gods, and Kyle on the hall. The two talked peacefully with each other. So, what's the second thing you're referring to? Kyle asked thoughtfully. The second thing, Odin looked complicated, and recalled. This matter started 1,000 years ago. The universe was in turmoil 1,000 years ago. At that time, there was an evil race called Dark Elves. They wanted to plunge our universe into endless darkness, trying to gain control of an ancient weapon capable of destroying everything. Ancient weapon? What is that? Kyle immediately became curious. Up to now, he has personally experienced the Marvel worldview. Those rumored powerful weapons are nothing more than artifacts handed down from ancient races, such as Thor's hammer, Eternal Flame, etc., as well as the well-known Infinity Gems. As if to verify Kyle's guess, Odin said slowly, that ancient weapon is called Ether Particle. Ether Particle? That's right. A light flashed in Kyle's eyes. Among the 6 infinite gems containing cosmic power, there was the only gem that did not exist in the form of gems. Ether Particle, aka Reality Gem. Legend has it that it possesses a powerful gem that turns all fantasy into reality and reality into nothingness. In an extremely peaceful tone, Odin recounted the mythical history of those years, before the most brutal dark elf, Malekith, used the ether particles. I led the God's Domain holy army to destroy its plan. It was in a fierce battle where both sides suffered losses. The Dark Elf Legion finally retreated, and we captured the ether particles with a tragic victory, keeping the light and peace of the Nine Realms universe. What about ether particles? Kyle caught the point. Odin raised his head slightly, and pondered. I originally wanted to destroy the ether particles, lest it continue to harm the universe, but unfortunately it has too much energy, even I can't destroy it. So I can only bury the ether deep in the universe. Underground. I hope it will not appear in the universe again. Kyle's face became more and more confused. He looked at Odin and said bluntly, since you don't want ether particles to appear, why did you bring it up again now and tell me specifically? The less people should know about this matter, the better. Yes. But, everything can't go as I wish, even if I am the king of gods. Odin sighed with emotion, and said, just a few days ago, I noticed a side leak in the underground seal, and the ether particles may reappear. As for why I tell you, it is because the place where the ether particles appear is probably yours, where the earth is. Ether particles appeared on earth? Kyle's heart trembled, and his heart, which had always been calm, couldn't help being excited at this moment. He already has 3 infinity gems in his hand. The more gems he has, the richer his capital and foundation will be. If he can collect 6 infinity gems in advance, why worry about the purple sweet potato essence of Thanos? Kyle had been worried before that, except for the time gem from Gu Yi. There were no clues to the 2 gems left. Unexpectedly, so soon, the reality gem was born on its own initiative, and it also appeared on the home court of the earth as a door-to-door. I understand, Kyle suddenly realized, looked at Odin and said, you want me to solve the problem of ether particles? Odin nodded, yes. You are the guardian of God's domain on the earth, so it is most appropriate for you to do this. No. Kyle narrowed his eyes, touched his chin, and questioned, there is a person who should be more suitable than me. Why don't you call Saul first? Odin was silent for a moment, and explained, so, he is about to ascend the throne in God's domain, so it is not suitable for him to go to your earth frequently. Moreover, Saul has the blood of a god king, and that mortal woman named Jane? The last sentence is the main reason why you don't let Saul go. Kyle smiled lightly, but he was not interested in the housework of the Shenming family, and he didn't want to interfere too much, so he skipped the topic and said, leave the problem of ether particles to me, but I have one condition. Step out from the Hall of Asgard. The corners of Kyle's mouth rose slightly. This time he came to God's domain Asgard, not only got the whereabouts of the reality gem, Odin also promised to let him choose artifact forging materials including world tree branches and ulu metal after he completed the task. It can be said to kill 2 birds with 1 stone in the true sense. But Odin also has a condition, that is, he doesn't want Saul to know about it. London, Kyle murmured softly, clenched his hands into fists, and with a dazzling flow of energy in the form of double stars, he turned into a stream of light and left Asgard, returning to the Rainbow Bridge building at the portal of God's domain. Less than a second. Kyle traveled a few kilometers to the Rainbow Bridge where Heimdall was on duty. Heimdall stood on the central high platform, holding the silver holy sword that was the key to the Rainbow Bridge, and opened his shining eyes to look at Kyle. "Guardian, send me back," Kyle said quickly. "It is good." Holding the silver holy sword in both hands, Heimdall inserted it into the groove of the high platform of the Rainbow Bridge, and was about to open the rainbow portal to Earth, when he suddenly frowned. "Someone is coming back from the battlefield." Following his words, Heimdall activated the Rainbow Bridge, and under the swirling rainbow light, a tall and burly figure suddenly appeared in the hall. Frantic blonde hair and beard, rough and handsome face, wearing a majestic silver-armored red cloak, holding Thor's hammer that contains the power of thunder. The person who appears in front of him is not Thor, but who else? Odin. "I still can't get around it," Kyle, who was in the same place, said helplessly to himself. As soon as Sol, who returned to God's domain, saw Kyle, he walked up to him in great surprise, and opened his hands with a big laugh. "Kyle. My friend, long time no see." "Yes, I haven't seen you for a few years, and you are getting stronger again." Kyle returned a smile, and hugged him with a bear in response. After greeting each other, Sol looked at Kyle suspiciously, and said, "Go back to Earth. Why don't you come to God's realm when you have time, and don't let Heimdall notify me?" Before Kyle could respond, Heimdall said, "Your Majesty specially summoned the guardians of God's realm, Father." Sol raised his brows without thinking too much. He naturally put his shoulder on Kyle's shoulder and suggested, "It's just in time for you to come. Don't go back so soon. Come to tonight's celebration banquet by the way. I invite you to taste the fine wine of our God's domain." Kyle resolutely refused. "That's good. But there is something at home that needs to be dealt with. Wait until next time, and I'll come to God's domain to find you when I'm free." "Okay, I'll keep the good wine for you," Sol said heartily. Kyle was breathing a sigh of relief, but Heimdall on the high platform suddenly said, "Sol, the human woman you asked me to take care of has disappeared from the earth." Sol's pupils shrank. He removed his hand from Kyle's shoulder, and asked anxiously, "Jane, what's the matter?" Heimdall shook his head, and said in a deep voice, "I don't know too well. She was originally in the city of London on Earth, but she suddenly slipped out of my sight." "So?" Thor hesitated for a moment, but still made up his mind. "Open the door, Heimdall. I'm going to London on Earth." "Yes," Heimdall nodded, and his eyes shifted to Kyle. "The Guardian is going back to Earth? Just right." "Yeah, just right." Kyle smiled bitterly, not knowing what to say anymore. Chapter 477. The ether particles are present. Kyle looked at Sol, who was anxious and determined, and knew that there was no way to dissuade him this time. Perhaps in the view of Odin, the God King today, Sol is the future king of Asgard. He will soon be in charge of the supreme power, and has a lifespan measured in 10,000 years. On the other hand, human women on Earth only have a lifespan of a mere 100 years and are weak and weak. Naturally, he is not optimistic about the relationship between Sol and Jane. But the aloof Odin will not know that human beings can become gods, and gods will also fall into the world one day. This is fate and the universe. Nothing is set in stone. Is it because I am getting old? I was still infected by the old man Odin, and I always feel that my thoughts are getting older. Kyle looked dazed for a moment, then nodded towards Heimdall, and said, "Open the Rainbow Bridge. I will go to London with Sol." Earth London. Located in the central area, a huge abandoned factory building. Police cars with flashing lights and flutes came out of the streets and stopped outside the factory buildings. Then, policemen in police uniforms and guns stepped out of the cars. "Break into it through the door." In the open space inside the factory building, a black van was parked. Jane's research assistant and friend, Daisy, was recording the research materials with a young man, the new assistant. Faced with the sudden intrusion of a group of armed policemen, Daisy and the two were also shocked, and the documents in their hands were almost spilled on the ground. Serious warning. You have illegally entered private land. Please take all your belongings and get out of here immediately. Please execute everything within 5 minutes or we will take enforcement measures. The head of the police captain held a loudspeaker and shouted at Daisy and others in the factory building, while the rest of the police stood by sternly and coldly. "Daisy, what do we do now?" The young man who was the new research assistant panicked and looked at Daisy hastily. "What else can I do? Jane must still be in the house. Find Jane first. If I can't find her, I will never leave. Daisy's cold face remained calm and her words were firm. Just as she was about to enter the building to search again, a figure staggered out of the factory suddenly. Daisy took a closer look and found that it was Jane who had disappeared inexplicably before. Simple. Daisy threw the documents in her hand into the car in surprise, rushed forward in 3 steps at a time, and supported Jane, whose face was slightly pale. Jane, where were you just now? We put the entire factory. I searched all over the building, but I couldn't find you. I don't know, that place is weird, like a closed underground somewhere. Jane shook her head, her beautiful eyes still hazy. Boom. At this time, accompanied by the strong and dull thunder, the sky that was originally covered with gray and dark clouds suddenly poured down with heavy rain, which drenched all the policemen and young assistants in the surrounding field. Only Jane and Daisy stood in the middle of the open sky. They seemed to be sheltered by some kind of power, and even the rain formed by nature just avoided them. What's going on? Daisy looked up at the sky, and stretched out her palm in surprise, but not even a drop of rain fell on her body. Jian looked sideways as if aware of it, and saw only a dozen meters away, Sol, who was wearing silver armor and holding a hammer, had been standing there since some time, watching her affectionately and quietly. Sol, Jane muttered softly, and when she saw her protest boyfriend who had been missing for several years, she walked over with anger and disbelief. As soon as Jane stepped forward to leave, the rain began to fall. Seeing that Daisy was about to suffer, but just as the rain was approaching the top of her head, it naturally bounced to both sides. It seemed that there was an invisible air wall to isolate the rain outer. From behind came a very magnetic and calm male voice. Miss Daisy, long time no see. Daisy's heart skipped a beat, and she turned around to look. The person standing behind her was not the silver-haired and handsome Kyle. I haven't seen you for a few years. The years still haven't left a trace on Kyle's face, still young and handsome as if walking out of a portrait. Kyle. Why are you here? Daisy covered her open mouth with both hands, and then embraced Kyle's arms excitedly. She was almost stunned by the great happiness. She never thought that after parting from New Mexico, she would have the opportunity to meet the man in front of her again. Followed that guy. Kyle raised his chin forward, and said to Sol, who was about to kiss Jane passionately in the rain, Sol, you reminiscing about the old times, and the passion is the passion, can ye harvest the rain first? We are all in, look at it. Hearing Kyle's words, Sol can only shrug helplessly, stop the intimacy with Jane, raise the Thor's hammer in his left hand, and stop the heavy rain indirectly caused by him. After the rain stopped, Daisy, the young assistant, stepped forward with concern. His eyes fell on Daisy's hand that was hugging Kyle intimately. His face couldn't help being a little stiff, and he asked shortly, who is he? I remember you said that no male friends. Perhaps because of his haste, he didn't recognize Kyle immediately. Your admirer. Kyle smiled slightly, and looked down at Daisy. Daisy gave him a blank look, and hugged her hands tighter. Her towering chest was pressed on her arms and almost deformed, which made the young assistant look stunned. Daisy's cheeks were pink, her sexy lips approached Kyle, and she whispered, please, help me, I can't help you with this, just deal with it yourself. Kyle shook his head, and pushed his palm lightly, but without much effort. Daisy's body was slowly pushed away by the gentle repulsion. Daisy looked at Kyle, who walked away from her side. Her cheeks were puffed up, she stomped her feet angrily, and bared her teeth fiercely at his back. Damn it. It's still the same. The young assistant stared at her incredulously. Daisy, you really? Daisy snorted coldly, and said with her waist inserted, that's right, Miss Ben just likes him. What's wrong? The young assistant yelled and didn't dare to make a sound. A group of policemen wanted to negotiate with Jane and the others, but the police captain obviously recognized Kyle, and hurriedly waved his hands to signal an emergency retreat. Many policemen were at a loss, but they obediently got into the police car and left. Kyle paced step by step, approaching Sol and Jane. The closer he got, the tighter his frown became. The coercion on Kyle overflowed involuntarily. Feeling the terrible pressure like a mountain, Jane subconsciously leaned on Sol's strong arm. Kyle, you scared her. Sol looked at Jane. Then looked at Kyle, who was approaching, and reminded him. Kyle looked directly at Jane next to Sol, and said, Sol, there's something wrong with her. What? What's wrong with her? Sol was blinking in surprise, and then centered on Jane's body. A strange and powerful red energy burst out, slapping and bursting in the air one after another, and the nearest soul was directly blasted out. Kyle raised his left hand in a very quick reaction, and the times repulsion immediately formed a protective shield to offset the energy impact of the isolated red, just protecting Daisy and the others behind him. After the strange energy erupted from her body, Jane immediately lost consciousness and passed out directly on the wet ground. Was that ether particles just now? Kyle narrowed his eyes. His cold and calm eyes never moved away from Jane's slender body. Found the fifth Infinity Stone. Chapter 478 Attack on God's Domain. God's Domain, Asgard, and the medical room of the Proteus. The unconscious Jianping lay on a stone bed, his brows were slightly frowned, and his face was also slightly painful. Beside him was an old wizard in a cloak and holding a staff, facing Jane with his withered palms, chanting a series of difficult spells in a low voice. After a while, the old wizard withdrew his palm, and Furuwubo's face showed no expression. Sol, who had been standing by the side, couldn't help asking, "How is Jane? Is she okay?" "It's weird." The old wizard lowered his eyebrows, stared at Jane, and said slowly, "There is a mysterious and powerful force in her body, which far exceeds the limit that she can bear as a mortal. I don't dare to cast spells lightly. A bad one could endanger her life." Simple. Sol's face was a bit ugly, and he stood beside him, holding Jane's delicate left hand carefully with his rough hands. "You go back first." Kyle sat on the chair with his legs crossed, and said to the old wizard. "Yes, Guardian." The old wizard bowed respectfully to Kyle and left the medical room. "Sol, she'll be fine." Kyle comforted Sol, and his eyes fell on Jane on the stone bed. As the son of the God King, Sol couldn't perceive the energy in Simplified's body, and the wizard also used spells to peek into the tip of the iceberg of potential energy. But Kyle is different. He can clearly feel the almost overflowing red energy in Jane's body. This energy brings him not only a sense of threat, but also an unimaginable sense of intimacy. The ether particles seem to want to communicate with Kyle. Is it because he holds the power gem, or is it due to the double star energy awakened by the space gem in his body? Or both? Kyle pondered for a long time. He did not carry all the infinity gems with him. The mind gem was still kept by Yutong, which had an overlapping effect with a mind ability. The space gem was placed in the Carl family general base to create a cutting-edge weapon with unlimited energy. At the moment, he only carries one power gem as insurance. After all, with Kyle's current strength, no one can pose a fatal threat to him, and with a power gem that can increase his personal strength at any time, even if he looks at the entire Marvel universe, few people dare to fight him. Before Kyle could figure it out, there was a guard's voice at the door, and Odin, holding a golden scepter, strode into the room. Sol's eyes lit up slightly after seeing Odin open, and he couldn't help but said eagerly in a pleading tone, "Father, please save Jane. With your strength, I can definitely do it." Odin glanced at Jane on the stone bed, with a dignified face, and said in a deep voice, "Sol, you should know that she is not from the same world as us. You should not take her back to God's domain without authorization, but it should be handed over to the guardian of Kyle, the doctor in the world where he lives." Sol became more and more anxious, and quickly said, "But in her body." Before Thor could finish his words, the tide of red energy overflowed from Jian's body again, like boiling magma, stirring up layer by layer in the air. The sudden burst of energy, Thor, and even Odin did not react. Kyle had already got up. He took a step forward, his golden pupils shone brightly, and his right hand wrapped in glare energy stretched out like lightning. The red energy is manic and tyrannical, and the double star form is even more fierce and domineering. However, when the two destructive energies meet, they cancel each other out in a gentle and calm way. Circles of glare energy lingered around Kyle's body, bathing him with abundant flames. His surging and powerful aura rose one after another, causing the items in the medical room to shake. Compared with Sol and Odin next to him, Kyle looked more like a supreme god at this time, holding his right hand palm, and Nirvana suppressed the red energy overflowing from Simplified body. Seeing this scene, Odin narrowed his eyes, his face thoughtful. Cool. Until the red energy dissipated, Kyle let out a sigh of relief, releasing the double star form that seemed to be wearing a halo. Seeing Jane's rosy face recovering, Sol said excitedly, "Kyle, can you control the mysterious energy in Jane's body?" "I don't know, but you can give it a try." Kyle shrugged. He was sure that the ether particles in Jane's body. This situation is similar to the cosmic Rubik's Cube containing the original space stone. If the ether particles were taken out without causing any harm to Jane, he would probably be the only one in the universe. Only card drawing is the most reliable. However, with a level of infinite gems, it is estimated that the card drawing progress bar will take a long time to read. Kyle thought to himself that when he extracted the original space stone, it took him half an hour to successfully extract it. Kyle, then please. Soul looked at Kyle with fiery eyes. Odin opened his mouth slightly, intending to say something, but a Protoss guard rushed into the room. His pale face was full of panic, and he reported loudly to Odin, "Your Majesty, there are a large number of enemy warships coming from the direction of the Rainbow Bridge. Break into God's domain." "You have broken through the first portal of God's domain, what did you say?" Thor's eyes widened in disbelief. The last time God's domain was breached, was it due to Lockeri's internal cooperation, but this time it was forcibly broken through by an external enemy? Odin grasped the scepter tightly, remained calm, and asked calmly, "Who is the enemy?" The guard quickly replied, looking at the style of the battleship, "It should be a dark elf, dark elf." "Go." Odin snorted coldly. The scepter slammed on the floor, and then left the medical room with the guards halfway through. Odin turned his head and said, "Kyle, I'm counting on you this time too." Odin didn't talk to Soul again during the whole process, obviously because of Jane. He still had some disappointment with Soul. After Odin left, Thor's rough face tightened, holding Thor's hammer. He wanted to rush out, but was stopped by Kyle. Soul looked at Kyle in surprise, and asked loudly, "Kyle, what are you stopping me for? Asgard has been invaded, and I should be on the front line to stop the enemy's attack. You're gone. What about Jane? You stay on the Asgard side, and as for the Rainbow Bridge, let me go." Kyle patted Soul on the shoulder, and without waiting for his response, he walked out of the door vigorously. The big reason why Kyle lets Soul stay is because Jane has ether particles, and the Dark Elves are bound to come for the ether particles. If you want to win the reality gem, pass my level first. It's been a long time since I've fought a real battle, and my bones are so dull that I'm about to freeze, Kyle whispered to himself, slightly twisted his neck and wrist, and suddenly made a crackling sound like fried beans. He went against the holy army gathered in Asgard for protection, walked out of the hall of the Golden Palace alone, stood on the edge of the high platform, and looked down in the direction of the Rainbow Bridge. Boom! From the starry sky cliff at the end of the Rainbow Bridge, many black warships in the shape of a T can be seen, many of which have escaped from the invisible camouflaged form, showing a cold and lustrous metal shell. After dozens of hundreds of black battleships broke through the portal of the Rainbow Bridge, they broke into Asgard with the charged light cannons of the God's Domain protective equipment. Kyle closed his eyes against the strong wind of gunpowder smoke, and opened his hands to both sides. When he opened his eyes again, the broken gold eyes were ignited with raging flames, and rounds of sacred and domineering double star energy radiated from his body. Long time no war. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 479, Twin Star Kyle and Adult Venom. A large-scale war is imminent. Black warships broke in from the portal of the Rainbow Bridge in an endless stream. All the protection systems of Asgard of God's domain were activated, and the mutual bombardment resounded in every corner of Asgard's territory. The bombarded black battleship in the sky turned into ashes, graffitied the sky dotted with bright starry mornings into gray, and the wreckage of the battleship fell to the residential area below, causing countless original residents of Asgard to panic everywhere. Escape. The Dark Elves are not ordinary fighting races. They have cutting-edge technology, good personal evolution, and years of fighting experience with the Asgardian Protoss. Therefore, this fearless raid was almost instantaneous. Then he pointed his sword at Asgard, which was the center of God's domain. Some residents of Asgard looked up at the sky in horror, and saw a T-shaped black warship, flexibly avoiding several rounds of bombardment from God's realm, freely interspersed among the magnificent golden buildings, and soon completely broke through and approached Asgard area. Just as the black warship entered the area directly in front of Asgard, at this moment, a glaring figure leaped up from below, like a small sun rising from the horizon, radiant and powerful. Heading towards that, the black battleship accelerated and flew away. What is that? Not only the Dark Elves were stunned, but even the local residents of Asgard were also stunned fast. The speed is too fast, even a beat faster than the light cannon. In the blink of an eye, this time even the black battleship didn't have time to dodge or defend. The trajectory of the figure has formed an arrow of light, which just entered from the bottom of the battleship and pierced out from the top of the battleship. The thickened metal protective shell is as fragile as tofu paper. Within half a second, the warship turned into a ball of smoke billowing in fire, roaring and crashing towards the lake next to the immortal palace in the divine realm, causing splashes all over the sky. Okay, the golden pupils with cold light raised up, and Kyle blasted out 2 powerful light cannons with his hands clenched into fists in the next instant. The sky above his head seemed to be pierced by a light cannon, and the outline of a battleship emerged in the empty area, and it was forced to land uncontrollably. But it was 2 black battleships in stealth and lurking mode, have to say. The super battleship of the Dark Elves has been able to cross the portal of the Rainbow Bridge, and has been able to hide from part of the defense system of God's domain. Pretty no matter how invisible and camouflaged the battleship is, when it passes over its head, the leftover airflow is too obvious for Kyle in the double star form. Kyle turned into a colorful streamer dragging a comet-like tail flame. He shuttled back and forth in the area in front of Asgard. One punch of his was a light cannon that condensed space energy. Those battleships that could dominate the starry sky were as fragile as toys in his hands. That's the guardian of God's domain, so strong. Is he really human? That's outrageous. Many residents of Asgard were stunned, looking at the dome of the sky, and hovering in the sky for more than 3 times at that moment, the human Kyle, whose strength alone is stronger than tens of thousands of holy soldiers before this. Although Odin personally canonized Kyle as the guardian, many residents of Asgard still maintain a skeptical attitude towards Kyle. After all, in the old concept of consciousness, human beings are uncivilized and low-civilized races. But after today's battle, I believe no one in God's domain will question Kyle's strength. Because compared to Kyle, who is invincible, they undoubtedly look more like mortals. The flames were burning and rising on the body surface, and Kyle was suspended at a height of, meters. He did not know how many black warships he destroyed, but not only did the hostile fighters show no signs of sharp decline, but more and more. Kyle looked in the direction of the Rainbow Bridge coldly. Those black battleships, buzzing like a swarm of bees, were still heading towards Asgard without fear of death. The civilizational forces he encountered before. The Nova people know how to talk about peace and civilization, and the Crestar people know how to fear and retreat, and the current Dark Elves are like a group of mad dogs, with a crazy and terrifying obsession, as if even if they use the whole clan and civilization as cannon fodder, they will do whatever they can mission complete. The effect is undoubtedly significant. Even if Asgard's defenses were fully opened, and Kyle blocked it from outside, many black fighters still entered the Asgard area. The Dark Elves and the God Guards were fighting in the palace. Smoke, shouts, and killings pervaded the Asgard. We can't stop them anymore. We must close the Rainbow Bridge portal again to cut off their reinforcements and retreat. As for the enemy forces inside, they can only be handed over to the gods to clean up. Thinking of this, Kyle accelerated his flight without any hesitation, and rushed towards the portal of the Rainbow Bridge in the opposite direction of the black battleship's advance all the way. The black warships that Kyle encountered on the way, as long as they were no more than 100 meters away from him, all exploded one after another under the baptism of the light cannon at the end of the fist, like a tragic fireworks blooming in the apocalypse. Tread. Kyle landed on the undamaged Rainbow Bridge, looked around, and when he saw no one in the building, he couldn't help but shouted, "Heimdall, are you there? Heimdall, here, here." When Kyle yelled a second time, a hand holding a long sword suddenly stretched out from the turbulent lake under the Rainbow Bridge, followed by Heimdall's dark head. Kyle fished Heimdall up. Heimdall was wet all over, holding the holy sword in both hands. Half kneeling on the Rainbow Bridge, he opened his bloodshot eyes wide, looking at the group of black warships that continued to sink into the god's domain from the cliff at the end of the Rainbow Bridge. "Kyle, Guardian, I must restart the Rainbow Bridge portal and close the passage to and from the god's domain. What do I need to do?" Kyle asked. "First, find a way to stop the battleship group." Heimdall spit out this sentence, held the holy sword, and ran towards the building at the end of the Rainbow Bridge. "It's simple." Kyle took a deep breath, clenched his 5 fingers into a fist, and the energy of the double stars surged accordingly. Under the cover and protection of the flames, he rushed towards the gap in the passage of the cliff of God's domain. Visually, the cliff gap, which is tens of kilometers long and wide, is difficult to block by itself. With a wave of his left hand, Kyle pulled out a biological card, Venom. Haven't you been out for exercise for a long time? It's been a long wait, my master. After summoning the biological card into an entity, a mass of linear sticky organisms eagerly adhered to the surface of Kyle's body and entered his body. After the venom symbiotically entered the body, Kyle's aura changed drastically, and his body muscles did not swell. The original sacred and colorful dual star energy was transformed into an evil, dark flame. In the Vulcan form, the venom that is afraid of fire cannot coexist with it, but the double star form is different. The energy is more polarized and space-based. It should allow the venom to coexist with it for a short time. Within seconds of this symbiosis, Kyle raised his palm inexplicably, and he felt that his strength, or energy, was unprecedentedly powerful at this moment. Chapter 480. On the cliff at the edge of God's domain. Kyle was suspended in the gray sky 1,000 meters above the ground, standing alone facing the strong wind and the battleship. His eyes were faintly red, and his whole body had the appearance of a dark and cold humanoid monster. The muscles are no longer swollen and strong like the Hulk, but they are tough and strong like steel, and every pore and hair strand is bursting with raging black flames. He seemed to be the incarnation of natural disaster, with an indescribably destructive aura inside and out. This is the venom symbiosis amplification state under the double star. It really succeeded. Looking down at the palm of the lingering black flame, Kyle murmured to himself, he just wanted to try it, but he didn't expect to successfully coexist with a venom in the double star form, and the effect of the fusion was far beyond imagination. If the extraordinary body in the double star form has already reached a certain peak in physique and energy, a balanced and perfect supreme fighting state. After adding venom, this balance was completely torn apart. Kyle can clearly feel that the power in his body has broken through the limit and soared without limit. The energy is unprecedentedly abundant and powerful, but at the same time it becomes difficult to control. Even breathing with a slightly open mouth will overflow the energy. Even if you don't breathe, the energy will escape from the pores drain. He even has a wonderful sensory awareness, able to blow up a living planet with one punch, and kick the wall of the universe with one kick. This is due to the illusion that his strength is beyond the original. If this overloaded state lasts for more than 10 seconds, Kyle is convinced that even his protost-gene body cannot bear the sequelae of severe overdraft of body energy. This may not be the critical point height that the current Marvel Universe can reach. A flash of understanding flashed in Kyle's heart, and he clenched his right fist little by little, and the energy of the black flame flowed and gathered. He wanted to vent out the excess energy as soon as possible, and then release the current state of dual star symbiosis. Forcibly maintaining a state that cannot be controlled is undoubtedly playing with fire and self-immolation. Then try that trick. Kyle took a deep breath, inhaled all the spilled energy within a radius of 10 meters into his mouth, and then slowly opened his palm facing the void of God's domain where hostile warships were still emerging. Thousands of tentacles, at this moment. Space and time seemed to have all stagnated, and then with Kyle as the center, circles of airwaves and wind pressure spread out of thin air, dispelling the dark clouds on the top of the dome to reveal the sky full of stars, and parting the lake below to reveal the reefs below. Asgard Hall. Odin, who had just killed an intruder on the ground, suddenly turned his head. He looked towards the direction of the Rainbow Bridge, his cloudy eyes burst into light. This feeling is Kyle, underworld prison. In the dim-dimensional world, Hela with disheveled hair opened her eyes. She looked up at the end of the chaos above her head, and said hoarsely, Odin? No, that old immortal can't reach it, the edge of the universe. Several humanoid beings who do not need spaceflight equipment and walk on non-living stars also seem to feel something while looking in the direction of God's domain. Interesting. There's life again, almost breaking through the critical point. The universe will be lively soon. The raging and violent overflowing energy in the body got a vent, and burst out from Kyle's right arm. Laugh, laugh, laugh. The black flames formed sharp tentacles, piercing the air at supersonic speed, and growing wildly like vines and seaweeds. Dozens of black battleships that had just emerged were completely penetrated in an instant, and then the wreckage was blown away by the dense and huge torrent of tentacles. Buried in series. The last time I used thousands of tentacles, Kyle escaped on Sokka. The tentacles covered the entire interstellar fighting field, and successfully defeated a god with a mortal body. And this time the 10,000 tentacles, both in terms of number and attack intensity, are more than 10 times stronger than the first 10,000 tentacles. This is the real myriad. Inside the Rainbow Bridge building. Heimdall had just used the holy sword to close the portal of the Rainbow Bridge. When he came out of the building, the scene he saw prompted him to stop. His face was dull, his mouth was wide open, and he took a deep breath. As the gatekeeper who has guarded God's domain for many years, Heimdall has a pair of divine eyes to see the 9 realms, but he has never seen what is happening in front of him. I saw a series of black tentacles burning with flames, plunging deeply into the bottom of the lake, going up until they submerged into the sky wall, and extending to the ends beyond the reach of the eyesight on the left and right sides. These tentacles just completely sealed off one side of God's domain, which connects the sky and the earth, and turned into a black moat that blocked everything on the original cliff waterfall above the sky. Kyle landed lightly back on the Rainbow Bridge. His casual clothes were all wet with sweat, panting heavily, holding a card turned from venom between the fingers of his left hand lifted. Thousands of tentacles are like a fatal blow. No matter what, they will exhaust all the energy and physical strength in your body. Kyle looked at Heimdall, let out a long breath of heat, shrugged and said, "So, is it blocked?" The corners of Heimdall's eyes twitched slightly, looking at the moth-like tentacles beside the Rainbow Bridge. He sighed sincerely. "Guardian, no matter what you did just now, your effect is too good." Heimdall, like the residents of Asgard, was a bit repulsed by Kyle as an outsider, but he has been watching Kyle's rapid growth through his eyes, and now Kyle, who almost stopped the enemy's reinforcements by himself, he felt that the faith in his heart was showing signs of collapse. Is Kyle strong? There is no doubt that as a human being, he is already so strong that it is unreasonable. But more importantly, he is often able to create one miracle after another, often making amazing moves, turning impossibility and fantasy into reality. Kyle. He is the second most respected person in Heimdall's heart after Odin. Our side has done the best, and the rest is up to the fairy palace. Kyle raised his eyes and looked at the golden palace standing on the other side of the Rainbow Bridge. To be reasonable, with Odin and Thor sitting in charge, and the holy army of God's domain, it is absolutely impossible to lose to the raiding dark elves unless Odin's current body is older and weaker than Kyle expected. Fairy Palace. When Kyle and Heimdall rushed to the palace, the disputes in the battle had subsided, and what was left at the scene were the remains of the corpses of both sides, cutting-edge weapons and warship fragments scattered all over the ground. Walking further into the palace, Kyle saw many surviving Holy Army guards covered in blood. They began to gradually clean up the battle situation, but there was no joy of victory on their faces. Without exception, they were all heavy and mournful. Puff. Heimdall seemed to have seen the depths of the palace ahead of time. As if his body had been severely injured, he bent his left foot and fell to the floor on one knee, barely holding his body steady with the holy sword. Kyle knew something serious was going on, and asked in a deep voice, "Heimdall, what happened inside?" Heimdall was silent for a long time, slowly raised his sad dark face, and said with difficulty, "The Queen, the Saint has died." Chapter 481 The Emperor and Number 039, S. Twilight, Future Team USA. Queen of God's domain. That is Odin's wife, Thor's mother, named Gaia. Kyle had seen the queen a few times before. Her hair was neatly coiled up, her eyes shone with wisdom, and her gestures were indescribably dignified and elegant. But this time, the queen was lying in the coffin in silence forever, her face neither sad nor happy. Even if she was killed by the dark elves, she obviously passed away without pain. But the queen's departure brought endless grief to the living in God's domain. In the main hall of the Immortal Palace, after the temporary treatment by the guards, the golden floor was as clean as new, only the blood and smoke of gunpowder floating in the air. Thor, the god of thunder, was next to the queen's wooden coffin, his hands clenched into fists, and his knees were kneeling on the ground, his body trembling uncontrollably. He clenched his teeth so hard that he could barely make any sound. Jane did not know when she regained consciousness. She stood behind Saul, with her hands on his broad shoulders, and her pale face also showed sadness. Odin sat alone on the throne of God's domain, with only his left eye staring directly at the coffin in the hall. His wrinkled face was as calm as before, but his shoulders were slightly suppressed and trembling. At this moment, the emperor who had ruled the Nine Realms universe for an unknown number of years seemed to be a teenager again. The guards and wizards of the fairy palace in the main hall all looked sad, which made the grand main hall fall into a silent and sad atmosphere. Kyle stood with no one, folded his arms and leaned against a pillar in the corner of the main hall looking at the scene of mourning in silence in the main hall. He couldn't help sighing a few times in his heart. Not backwards, Starting from this moment, as one of the strongest forces in the Marvel Universe, God's domain will continue to decline in the future. In other words, since the time when the second Prince Loki defected, the immortal palace of God's domain, which stands proudly on the top of the myth, has been going from prosperous to the end. Odin, the king of gods, is getting older and more corrupt. The queen of God's realm is dead. Loki is still secretly sabotaging, and Thor is unable to fully shoulder the heavy responsibility of the king. The decline of the royal family of God's realm also indicates that Asgard is about to perish, and there may be no more legends about the Rainbow Bridge and the Golden Asgard in the future. This is someone else's family and state affairs, and naturally has nothing to do with Kyle. It is enough that he has done everything he should do as a guardian. At the moment, what Kyle really cares about is the ether particles lurking in Jane. Wait, ether? Kyle's face changed slightly, and he suddenly realized that something was wrong. His eyes quickly fell on Jane in the main hall. From the other person's body, the previous intimacy and destructive aura were gone. The ether particles are no longer in the simplified body. How is this going? If the Dark Elves succeed, I'm afraid Jane will not be able to stand safely in the main hall. Could it be that, in the Immortal Palace just now, besides God's domain and Dark Elves, there were also third-party forces secretly intervening? Kyle's brain is like a supercomputer, and his thoughts are running rapidly in his mind, thinking about whether important information has been missed at the same time. The extraordinary thoughts and senses are expanded outward, covering the entire main hall of Asgard Palace, and extending outward one by one at this time. Kyle seemed to notice something, turned around suddenly, and looked out of the main hall from the depths of the fairy palace. He sensed two familiar auras, and it was precisely because of the familiarity that he felt such a strong sense of disobedience. The guards and wizards in the main hall, including Thor Odin, were still in grief, obviously not noticing that outsiders had sneaked into Asgard at this time. Kyle stepped back quietly. He was already in the corner, and within a few steps, he left the main hall without anyone noticing. Inside the Immortal Palace, a room near the Shenzhou mansion, a group of burly guards in gold armor patrolled the corridor. Just after they passed by, a tall young man stepped out from the shadow behind a pillar. The tall young man was wearing a white tight-fitting uniform with a sense of technology, holding a silver suitcase in his left hand, and a hammer of the same style as Thor in his right hand, and sneaked in with his back against the wall of the corridor. The time of arrival is correct. According to the prompt given by Saul, just put the ether in his room, the tall young man muttered to himself, and after finding his ultimate goal this time among the many mansion rooms in the corridor, he quickly stepped forward without hesitation. He opened the door and entered the room, and before a team of God's domain guards returned from patrolling, he closed the door in advance in a thrilling manner. Fortunately, everything went well. The tall young man patted his chest and exhaled, but after turning around, all his movements stopped abruptly. I saw Kyle sitting on a chair in the room with his legs crossed and his chin resting on his hands. The golden pupil narrowed his eyes on the young man and said lightly, "What kind of explanation should you give me?" "My friend, Steve." "That's right, it was Captain America Steve Rogers who sneaked into God's domain inexplicably." Before Steve could answer, Kyle rubbed his chin and said decisively, "You're not the Steve I know." "Wait, you're holding Thor's hammer." His identity was easily exposed. Steve smiled wryly, put down Thor's hammer and suitcase, and sat down at random. "Kyle, to be honest, you are the one I worry about the most when traveling through time and space. After all, no matter how careful you are, you will still. I can't hide it from you." Kyle looked at him in surprise. "Travel through time and space? So you come from another time and space?" Steve nodded and said, "Yes, I come from the future a few years later. Last time, someone from our time and space came to the present time and space and took away the ether particles in Simplified's body. Now I came here specially to return the gem." Talking at the same time, Steve opened the suitcase and took out a tube of glass bottle from it. Inside was a cloud of red mist, which was the extracted ether particles. A flash of greed flashed in Kyle's eyes, and it was fleeting. He calmly stood up from the chair, took the glass bottle containing ether particles in Steve's hand, and asked casually, "You have deliberately taken away from the current time and space gems? Now that they are returned again, what do you want to do?" Steve hesitated, finally shook his head, and said softly, "Sorry, Kyle. I can't tell you this. If you know too much, it may not be a good thing for your time and space. Even if it's me, I can't say it." Kyle rubbed the glass bottle containing ether particles, put it in his pocket, waved his hand and said, "Okay then. Forget it, sit down first, I'll get you a drink, we haven't had a drink for a long time." After Kyle finished speaking, he walked straight to the door of the room. Looking at Kyle's back, Steve suddenly had an ominous premonition that something terrible would happen once Kyle was allowed to leave the room. "Wait a minute, Kyle." Steve stood up and tried to call Kyle back. Kyle's hands were all on the doorknob. He turned his head, and when he saw the uneasy expression on Steve's face, the corner of his mouth unavoidably raised a wicked smile. As if struck by lightning, Steve said with difficulty, "You, not Kyle, after cheating so many times, I was finally cheated back." Chapter 482 The Lost Ether Particle. God Realm Asgard, in a room owned by Soul. Veteran. "You answered correctly, but unfortunately there is no reward." Kyle smiled evilly. With a change in his body, his silver hair turned into black hair, his face became paler and more feminine, and his casual clothes changed into a slim uniform. His real identity was the evil god Lua, who escaped from the Earth with a cosmic Rubik's Cube last time base. Loki didn't expect to be so lucky. Taking advantage of the chaos and sneaking back to God's domain, he happened to run into Steve, who returned the gem. "Loki, give me back the ether particle. It belongs to this time and space, but it shouldn't fall into your hands." Steve gritted his teeth, stared straight at Loki, squeezed his 5 fingers slightly, and Thor's hammer, which was on the ground, suddenly flew into his right hand autonomously. Thunder. The electricity sizzled from the hammer handle and wrapped around Steve's arm, so that his eyes were full of menacing lightning. Loki's face was gloomy and uncertain. Looking at Steve's right hand holding the hammer, he said in a low voice with a little reluctance, "Thor's hammer, even I didn't admit it, but in the end did I admit it to a mortal outside God's domain. Hand it over. This is the last warning." Steve raised Thor's hammer lingering in the arc, and said to Loki unceremoniously. Loki was not frightened, but instead smiled evilly and said, "What if I don't hand it in? Then I will replace your brother and teach you a lesson." As soon as Steve finished speaking, he seemed to be unable to bear it any longer. He swung the Thor's hammer in his hand, and a powerful and terrifying thunderbolt also blasted down, snaking towards Loki standing at the door. Goodbye then. Loki didn't intend to fight with a future Steve. He flipped his left hand, revealing a cosmic Rubik's Cube full of cracks. Just in the blink of an eye, Loki used space energy to open up a cloud of space fog, and his body disappeared from the room in an instant. Steve's pupils contracted violently, and he forcibly pulled Thor's hammer back, but the strong electric shock released was difficult to recover. The thunder and lightning struck the door of the room fiercely, blasting the entire door carved out of gold, with an extremely loud rumbling sound. "What happened? It's the room of the eldest prince. Quick! Go and have a look." As if a nest was exploding, all the guards of Asgard who were patrolling nearby followed the abnormal noise and rushed to the room where Steve was. This is what happened. The corner of Steve's mouth twitched slightly. He never expected that the last time they came to New York to fight, indirectly caused Loki to escape with a Rubik's Cube. This change not only affected the history of the current time and space, but also pitted him, a person from the future time and space. Loki was not arrested by the Avengers during the Battle of New York, so he was not imprisoned in the Asgard prison according to the original history, but was still operating freely and secretly in the universe. In addition, in Loki's hand, there is a cosmic magic cube that has not completely lost the space energy, allowing him to descend or escape to any space area at will. It can be said, the current Rocky is the strongest shit-stirring stick, making a mess of the original history. Before he had time to think about it, Steve heard the sound of intensive footsteps, approaching this side along the corridor. And his body tensed up forcefully. He had to escape from here first. If he was caught by the people of Chennai in the current time and space, it would really be the end of the game. It's just that in the currently heavily guarded God's domain, it's unrealistic to escape with Thor's hammer. Can I just leave the present time and space first? Steve had this idea, and was about to act on it, but the sound of many footsteps from far to near came to a sudden stop. "What are you doing?" Hearing a cold and calm voice, Steve's expression changed. This voice was in the corridor of Asgard. Seeing that it was Kyle, the guard captain who led the team, couldn't help but respect. "Guardian, we heard a strange noise coming from the prince's room, so especially." Kyle waved his hand and said casually, "Okay, what's the noise?" "It's just that I accidentally kicked the door down." "I see." The captain of the guard looked stunned. If it was before, he might still have doubts about Kyle's words, but after the battle in the morning, all the people in God's domain were overwhelmed by Kyle's powerful strength. Kyle said indifferently. Now the entire Asgard is mourning the queen, so don't make a fuss, return to your original position and continue patrolling, and send someone to repair the door after the funeral. Yes, what the Guardian taught. The captain of the guard quickly nodded, glanced at the Jingmen who had fallen in the corridor ahead, and led a large number of guards, hurriedly disbanded and evacuated in the corridors around. After the guards of God's domain left, Kyle kept his face calm, paced forward slowly, and entered the room where the portal was lost. Kyle's golden pupils flickered. He scanned the room where there was no one, and Thor's hammer resting on the table. He said angrily, "Why are you hiding? Can ye hide your existence from me?" Click. The antique wardrobe was pushed open, and Steve walked out carrying a suitcase. Steve looked at Kyle dejectedly, and said bitterly, "Thank you for saving me. Kyle, this time you should be really. Can I still be fake?" Kyle frowned slightly, seeming to understand something, narrowing his eyes and said, "Just now I sensed Loki's existence. He has been here too, right? He also pretended to be me and met you." Steve sighed helplessly. "In your capacity, he tricked the ether particles away from me." Kyle took a few steps forward, stared at Steve in front of him, and thought, "You are not the Steve I know." As Yutong said earlier, the flying and discharging broke into the unnatural office building. "You are the one who returned the Mind Stone, right?" "Yes," Steve nodded. Kyle said calmly, "You appeared in the battle in New York half a year ago, right? At that time, you wanted to take away the Rubik's Cube, and you had a fight with Steve at that time, and you were almost beaten to the ground by him." "Yes," Steve nodded again. Kyle continued, "Caesar left with you, right?" "Yes, exactly." Steve spread his hands in admiration, and said in a deep voice, "But Caesar didn't come back, and I didn't expect that." Kyle smiled lightly. "After all, I had a lot of guesses before, so seeing you now, those guesses are all connected together." But, Kyle changed the subject, "I still have many questions, and I need answers from you. The ether particle reality gem is lost as soon as it is lost, and the worst is to find it later. What is more important now is the meaning of another Steve's presence here." This is the first time that Kyle feels that there are more things in the Marvel Universe that he can control. Now Kyle is using his life, to really pursue the unfinished Avengers, plot. Steve and Kyle looked at each other, and finally let go, saying, "No problem, Kyle, just ask what you want to ask. Anyway, I have enough time to waste. However, the question about destroying your current time and space information, I will not tell you. I hope you can understand me on this point." "No problem," Kyle nodded. This is what he was waiting for. Chapter 483, The Peace Symbol and Captain America. Located above the Nine Realms, it has the Rainbow Bridge and the magnificent Golden Palace. This is the realm of Asgard, which once ruled civilizations and races one after another. As ancient and immortal legends and myths spread in the starry sky, they are awed and believed by thousands of creatures in the universe. And tonight, in the supreme god realm, which has always been high above the sky, from the immortal palace of the Proteus to the streets of the common people, every corner is filled with an atmosphere of depression and mourning. Asgardian civilians, young and old, walked out of the street from every household, with their faces downcast and full of sadness, holding candles lit in their hands, and walked towards the lake in the direction of the Rainbow Bridge. They were widely loved by the people. Queen Frigg's farewell. In front of the immortal palace, God King Odin and Thor, father and son, stood side by side, with a group of soldiers and wizards behind them, including Jane, who was a human woman. They quietly watched the maids of God's domain, and sent Frigga, who was sleeping in the flower coffin, to the lake of God's domain. The funeral of the Queen of God's domain has begun. It seemed that even the heavens were saddened by it. The night sky of God's domain was always bright and bright, but even the stars were much dim tonight, and the stars faintly fell on the Rainbow Bridge and the lake. Nobody noticed. At this time, on the top of a tower in the Golden Fairy Palace, two tall young men with silver hair and blonde hair, with starry eyes, were sitting together on a high place where the wind was howling, looking down at the stars and flickering lights. Dotted the funeral scene. Steve, with a light wave of his left hand, Kyle pulled out 2 bottles of good wine from the card space. After summoning them as entities, he threw one of the bottles at Steve. "Thanks." Steve has removed the protective hood, raised his hand to take the wine bottle, looked down and saw the 1944 brand on it, and couldn't help smiling. "I'm serious. Kyle, we haven't sat together to drink for a long time, right?" "Yes, it's still the taste of the past. Do you want to have a taste now?" Kyle smiled lightly, pressed his fingernails lightly, and the cork bottle cap was burned into nothingness by a well-controlled flame. Come on, who's afraid of who? Steve smiled and broke off the bottle cap, and the two raised the bottle like this and collided in the air like wine glasses. Boom, grumbler. After the confrontation, Kyle and Steve, as if they refused to admit defeat, drank all the wine in the bottle in one gulp against a cool night wind. Huh? Happy, putting down the bottle, Steve let out a long sigh of relief, and looked at Kyle next to him, with complex expressions in his blue eyes. Who would have thought that, as comrades in arms, Steve and Kyle had drank together 3 times in their lives? For the first time, in a European bar during World War II, Kyle and Steve were in the limelight as military forces, and Howard, who was the chief scientist of the science department at that time, and Agent Carter were also in their youth. The second time, in the 21st century, after Steve recovered from the ice, he drank wine with Kyle in front of Carter's grave. The third time is now. One is from the future a few years later, and the other is in the present time and space, meeting each other in a strange way and can let go of troubles and fights, and sit peacefully drinking and chatting together. I have to say that life is so amazing. After Kyle put down the bottle, he thought to himself, you said you came from the future after 2025. The future Avengers collect infinite gems from various time and space, and now you are specially responsible for returning them, so, in the end, you still won. Is it? It's a win, but it's also a loss. The important thing is not the ending, but the process we have gone through. Steve gave an ambiguous answer. He lowered his head and looked down deeply at the wooden coffin carrying the queen into the lake. Under the watchful eyes of countless people from Shanghai, the flower basket and wooden coffin floated along the lake to the waterfall at the end of the Rainbow Bridge. Kyle said calmly, no matter what the ending is, you still lost once thoroughly, otherwise you wouldn't take the risk and go to various time and space to borrow infinite gems. Only this matter has always made Kyle unable to let go. To know. To allow the future Steve and others to return to the past time and space is undoubtedly a gamble, wanting to reverse the failed and hopeless future ending. Based on this premise, it can be deduced that the future Avengers, even the Carl family, and Kyle, have all lost. It's possible? No matter how Kyle questioned, at present, since there is the existence of future Steve, it means that some things in the future time and space have become history. They really lost, and fell flat. Steve sighed softly. Kyle, that's what I'm worried about. If I told you about our failures in advance, you would question yourself too much, or feel small about the victories that never came. In a future that knows it's about to face brutal defeat, even a superhero can be crushed in an instant, right? Kyle was silent and didn't speak. But I still told you. Why? I should believe you. Steve looked very serious. He turned sideways, looked directly at Kyle and smiled. I'd rather believe in you than myself. Is it really good for you to be confident in me? Kyle shrugged and said, I failed too. At the beginning, you entrusted Peggy to me before your out-of-control fighter plane crashed into the sea. But I still failed your expectations and failed to protect her at all. Absolutely not. Kyle felt a dull pain in his heart, which was an irreparable regret in his life. Hearing Kyle's remorse, Steve laughed instead. Kyle, you haven't asked her personally. How do you know that she is not protected? How do you know that she died with what kind of mood in the end? Kyle trembled all over, and said to Steve, Steve, could it be that you... That's right, on the way to return the Infinity Stones, I went back to the past, that is, a few months after you left Earth after the end of World War II. I stayed there for half a year until Peggy passed away due to dystocia. Steve raised his head, patted Kyle on the shoulder, looked at him enviously, and said with emotion, Carter said that she never regretted liking you, and that was the one thing she never regretted in her life. That's right, like this, Kyle muttered to himself, feeling that the things that had been brooding in his heart for so long were finally let go at this moment. Steve smiled and said, Kyle, I really envy you. Not only because of Peggy, but also because we were born in the same military camp, but you are a symbol of peace, and I am just Captain America. You are radiant to the world the sun. And I'm just the relatively bright morning star. If you don't even believe in yourself, who can believe in this world and the future? I understand what you mean. Kyle laughed, and suddenly stood up from the peak of the tower, standing against the whistling wind. Don't worry, I never want to give up the fight. Your future time and space have suffered a complete defeat, but that doesn't mean the future of my time and space is the same. If it is an established fact that we are about to face failure, then I will rewrite this cruel fact. Kyle's determined words just fell. Below the Asgard, thousands of rocket plumes shot towards the lake, like a gorgeous meteor shower, disappearing at the end of the Rainbow Bridge following the flower basket and wooden coffin. Chapter 484 Request from Thor. In the future, Captain America came in a hurry and left in a hurry. Although he has a lot of time and can stay in the present time and space, he has no memory and sense of belonging here. In this world, as long as there is one Captain America is enough. With the previous concept of Superman being Caesar, Captain America used Pym particles to leave the current time and space before the dawn of God's domain, leaving Kyle with unlimited imagination and a sense of crisis. First, he lost the ether particle that should have been obtained, that is, the gem of reality, and then learned the historical facts of the defeat of the Avengers in the future. How can Kyle continue to vacation safely? It seems that the matter of God's domain must be resolved as soon as possible. Back on Earth, there are still many plans that need to be further implemented. In the God's Domain Palace mansion assigned to him, before Kyle could think it through, the door of the room was knocked by someone outside. Who, although he felt a familiar atmosphere, Kyle asked lightly towards the door. "Kyle, it's me." Thor's voice was a little anxious, as if he had something urgent to ask Kyle. "Come in." Kyle waved his hand towards the door, and the gravitational traction immediately opened the door lock. As soon as the door was opened, Sol, who was in the corridor outside the door, walked in quickly, and did not forget to close the door violently. "If you say that you are the host, I am the guest. But I still treat you to a drink to calm down." With a light lift of Kyle's finger, the wine bottle flew up automatically, filled the glass with wine, and then the glass flew towards Sol with a full amount of foam. Sol was also polite, grabbed the wine glass, gulped it down in one gulp, and put it on the table with a snap sound. The force was so great that even the glass almost shattered. Kyle raised his eyes and glanced at Sol, and said calmly, "Say it. You are so anxious to find me early in the morning, what's the matter?" Sol's face was a bit ugly, and he said, "Late last night, as soon as the mother's funeral was over, the father sent guards to arrest Jane and imprison him in the mansion room deep in the Asgard. The father said that there was ether in Jane's body, particles, and the dark elves are coming for ether particles. He's right to think so, at least, the ether particles cannot fall into the hands of the dark elves." Kyle nodded slightly, but Odin, Thor and the others didn't know that there were no ether particles in Jane's body at this time, and instead fell into the hands of the evil god Loki, who is a traitor to God's domain. On this point, Kyle can't say clearly yet. Sol said angrily, "I originally wanted you to take out the ether in simplified body, but my father disagreed. I asked to take the initiative to attack and destroy the Dark Elves, but my father still refused without hesitation. So, if you wait until you are old, you may make such a decision." Kyle smiled lightly. Whether it is a human or a Protoss, the older you are, the easier it is to lose your fighting spirit, and you are afraid of losing what you still have, so your life becomes more and more pedantic. Odin, the king of the gods, is no exception. If it was 1,000 years ago, or even 100 years ago, Kyle believes that Odin will definitely bring all the holy army, put aside all concerns, and directly enter the hinterland of the Dark Elves planet. Now Odin is old. His heroic appearance is no longer, his blood is getting colder, his combat power is gone, and his divine power is passing away. So even if he was killed by the Dark Elves to God's domain, and even the Queen was murdered, Odin still didn't dare to take the initiative to attack for the sake of the overall situation of God's domain. Odin is right, he is just what Thor looks like when he's old. No, even if I get old, I will never become a bad old man like him. Sol snorted coldly, raised his head slightly, his blonde hair was shining like an angry and mighty lion. "Since King Odin refuses to agree to your request, what do you want to do when you come to me now?" Kyle looked at Sol with eyes that see through everything, and said meaningfully. Sol took a deep breath, and said bluntly without surprise, "I want to take Jane out of God's domain. Not only that, but I also want to go to the Dark Elves' territory to avenge the dead Queen Mother." This sentence means that Sol will disobey Odin's order and try frantically on the verge of defecting from God's domain. But Sol's bold idea coincides with what Kyle thinks in his heart. One-sided defense in God's domain, waiting for the Dark Elves to come to the door, this is a waste of time. Instead of defending, it is better to attack directly and kill the Dark Elves. This is the simplest and rude solution. But my strength alone is not enough, so I need your help, Kyle. Sol looked at Kyle with sincere eyes, waiting for his reply with a little anxiety in his heart. Without Kyle's strength, I'm afraid he would not even be able to break through the gate of God's domain with Jane. Saul, you want me to risk betraying God's domain? Kyle smiled. Yes, I know. Saul clenched his fists and promised, as long as you help me this time, whatever happens to you in the future, just say it, eh? Thor, we'll do it for you, that's what you said. Kyle's eyes lit up slightly. Yes, Saul said, looking at the swearing Saul. Kyle let out a sigh of relief, spread his hands and said, okay then. Anyway, I have never been loyal to God's domain, nor betrayed at all. Now tell me about your plan. That's great. Saul was overjoyed, coughed, and began to talk about his plan. I'm going to. After half an hour. The main hall of the Immortal Palace. Odin was coming to the hall with his scepter, and before he sat on the throne, there was a guard outside the main hall, who rushed into the hall anxiously, and reported loudly dryly, King. Thor broke into the depths of Asgard, forcibly took the human woman away, and escaped with a dark elf spaceship we confiscated, and is fleeing towards the Rainbow Bridge. Okay, Odin frowned, tightly clenched the scepter with his left hand, and without thinking too much, he ordered angrily, quick. Go and tell the Guardian Kyle to stop Saul's spaceship. Don't let him leave God's domain. Half a step, King, the guard almost cried, and continued, Guardian, he is also on that spaceship. What did you say? Odin couldn't bear it any longer, and the scepter hit the floor heavily, making a dull and loud noise, which frightened the guards who came to report to be silent. Outside the Golden Asgard, a T-shaped black spaceship is fleeing outside at high speed. Inside the spaceship, Weiss is connected to the cockpit for unmanned driving. Saul and Jane sat in the back row holding hands, and Kyle, who was sitting in the front row, turned his head and asked Saul helplessly, your so-called plan, is this not bad? Saul didn't have any self-awareness about his plan. What kind of plan is this? Just go all the way to the end. Kyle shook his head. At this moment, the battleship spaceship trembled violently. Weissi's words came urgently, Master, God's domain's defense system is activated, and I want to shoot down the spaceship. Father is angry, Saul muttered to himself, holding Jane's soft little hand with his left hand, and his right hand tightly grasping the Thor's hammer that Steve secretly returned in the future, but his eyes became more and more firm. There's no turning back. Chapter 485 Heading to the Dark World. The light cannons of the Immortal Palace of God's realm were lifted up one after another, aiming at 1,000 meters above the sky, and the dark elf spaceship fleeing outside the Rainbow Bridge was a series of bombardment strikes. The battleship spaceship flicked its tail flexibly, easily dodging the first wave of offensive. Good. Inside the battleship, Kyle praised and said calmly, Weiss, it's up to you, I will handle it. As soon as Weisi finished speaking, the speed of the spaceship was raised to another level. While avoiding the laser bombardment, the distance between the end of the portal and the Rainbow Bridge was constantly getting closer. Jane widened her beautiful eyes in horror, looking like she wanted to look but didn't dare to look. Saul next to her patted her palm and said with a hearty smile, Don't worry, Kyle and the others are veterans. Master, there are obstacles ahead that cannot be broken through, Weiss suddenly reminded. Obstacle? Kyle raised his eyes in surprise, and looked through the windshield. At the end of the God's domain of the Rainbow Bridge, there was a moat full of dark barbs, standing coldly between the God's domain, the heaven and the earth. Almost forgot about that, Kyle slapped his head, but it was created by his own big move, and he easily blocked the follow-up battleship of the Dark Elves before. I'll go out and blast it away, Saul offered to suggest. Let me go, you don't even know how hard that thing is, Kyle shrugged. The tentacles have the strength to penetrate the physique of the Protoss, not to mention the mountain moat formed by the tentacles except for himself. It is estimated that few people can handle it quickly. Weiss, keep the speed and hit the tentacles directly. After Kyle gave the order, he opened the safety door and jumped down from the cabin. He was in the air, and the colorful double star energy gradually ignited until it completely covered the appearance of the tall body. Call. Kyle turned into a colorful streamer and chased after the dark elf battleship. He came to the top of the battleship's head, and his back directly touched the steel shell. Under the control of Weisi, the battleship accelerated and flew on its own, taking Kyle directly into the thick tentacles. Drink. At the same time, Kyle suddenly stretched out his fists, and the double star energy that had been prepared for a long time blasted out like a beam of light from a rainbow bridge, hitting the mountain moat in front of him one step ahead of the battleship. Boom boom boom. Part of the material of the tentacle moat was originally mixed with double star energy, But now under the strong impact of the double star energy, it suddenly melted at a speed visible to the naked eye like accumulated snow meeting scorching sunlight. With Kyle's double star energy opening the way, the Dark Elf battleship passed unimpeded, passed through the huge circular hole dug, completely crossed the rainbow bridge from the closed guard's domain, and arrived at the dazzling infinite starry sky outside. That's it, Kyle let out a sigh of relief. His eyes were ablaze with flames. He stood on the battleship, looked back at the suspended land of God's domain, and then returned to the battleship through the safety door. As soon as Kyle returned to the battleship, Weiss reminded solemnly, "Master, you sit still. I want to jump to the regional world where the Dark Elves are located through the save point recorded by this battleship. We're ready." Kyle nodded, looking at Sol beside him. Thor's beard and hair stood on end, and he said angrily, "Of course, I can't wait to smash the hammer on the face of the leader of the Dark Elves, Malekith." "Okay, start jumping now." Weiss pressed a button, and the battleship immediately disappeared from the vast universe, sinking into a broken jump space point. The three of Kyle in the battleship only felt a blur in front of their eyes, accompanied by the chaos and distortion of the space switch. The scene in front of the windshield of the battleship, from the boundless and bright starry sky, to a place full of wreckage of the battleship. The sky and the earth are dark, a desolate world that has lost its light due to the darkness and mist. "This is the dark world." Sol let go of Jane's hand and whispered in a low voice. Weiss reported, "It is detected that there are 3 warships of the same type below, and the other party seems to be waiting for us." "What should we do, Master? It's all here. What else can I do?" "Go down now." Kyle made a quick decision. The battleship kept slowing down and stopped on a small hill with a distance of, meters away from the Dark Elf. The hatch opens. Kyle, Thor, and Jane stepped down. The environment in the dark world was extremely harsh, with black mist lingering and wind and sand billowing. A group of people also came down from the battleship 100 meters away. It was the Dark Elf team headed by Malekith. "Welcome to the dark world, and you are welcome to bring ether particles here." Malekith faced the three of Kyle and opened his hands. He is not tall, and he looks like a black and white humanoid elf creature. The Dark Elves are not good at spells, but they are good at strengthening their bodies. They are fighting race no less than Asgard, possessing a power far beyond that of humans, especially the cursed fighters of their family, who are infinitely powerful and not mad enough to die. "Kyle, help me keep an eye on Jane. I'm going to hammer that bastard away." The enemy was extremely jealous when they met. Sol saw Malekith and thought of his dead mother. He couldn't bear it anymore, waved Thor's hammer and flew up, and rushed towards the Dark Elf team at high speed. "Sol!" Jane yelled, trying to rush forward, but was stopped by Kyle's hand. "Don't worry. He's Thor, and he'll be fine." Kyle smiled faintly and looked ahead. He just took this opportunity to see the combat power of the Dark Elves. On the sandfield below, the red cloak was rattling. Thor held Thor's hammer, and rushed towards Malekith like a shooting star. Malekith remained motionless, standing behind him all the time. The cursed warrior in bone armor suddenly took a few steps forward, standing in front of Malekith with a tall and burly figure. His thick arm swung out like lightning. With a single blow, Thor's slap with a hammer flew out. The cursed warrior let out a smirk, continued to walk forward, casually lifted a stone weighing more than 10 tons from the ground, and threw it at Thor. "Oh," cursed the warrior. "Not bad strength, but still a bit worse than the Hulk," Kyle commented softly when he saw this scene the other side. Thor quickly got up from the ground, threw Thor's hammer in his hand, smashed the flying stones into slag, and fought with the cursed warrior in the dust waves of gravel, causing a lot of air waves to sweep and fly 50 meters away. Kyle stroked lightly with his left hand, forming a wall of repulsive air, blocking all the dust waves rushing towards this side, and sheltering Jane next to him. Malekith looked away from Sol, and landed on Jane not far away, and issued orders to the Dark Elf guards next to him. The Dark Elf guards nodded one after another, bypassing the battlefield of Thor and the cursed warrior from both sides, and launched an attack in the direction of Kyle and Jane. "Kyle," Jane said anxiously, shivering and hiding behind Kyle's shoulder. "Have you finally made a move on our side?" Instead, Kyle smiled and narrowed his eyes. "I'm still bored if they don't come over." "Jane, don't leave me 5 meters away," Kyle said indifferently. "I know." Jane nodded like a rattle, hiding behind Kyle. She felt unprecedentedly at ease. "This is a matter of course. After all, what is in front of me is a symbol of peace, Earth's strongest combat power. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 486, Extremely Chaotic Situation. Tap tat tat. The heavily armed Dark Elf Legion at the bottom of the hillside, holding high-tech guns, rushed towards Kyle and Jane on the hillside along the wild sand and storm. The two numbers are completely out of proportion. But for some reason, the further they took a step forward, the fear in the Dark Elves' hearts would increase, as if they had stepped into a dead end, with a sense of oppression choking their throats. Is it an illusion? I always feel that what I am facing is not one or two people, but an iron-blooded army. Such thoughts appeared in the minds of countless Dark Elves for no reason. Kill the human man and take the human woman. This is the leader's order. The leading Dark Elf captain let out a low shout, and with the fearless Dark Elves, when they approached a distance of 20 meters, they aimed their high-tech guns at Kyle, who was standing in the front. This distance is just right. Kyle's face was calm, and he suddenly took a step forward, and as his footsteps fell to the ground, a white energy and strong pressure spread out under some irresistible force. The wind and sand reversed and rushed towards the Dark Elf Legion. Gravitational traction, killing domineering, double explosion. This is, after entering the 20-meter domain area, the Dark Elves all changed their colors, but it was the mysterious fear that had been lingering in their hearts before, which turned into a concrete and actual terrifying pressure. They only felt that their bodies seemed to be filled with lead, which was extremely heavy, and their feet seemed to be stuck in a quagmire, making it difficult to take any further steps forward. The Dark Elf was almost out of breath, and his heart was beating continuously at high load. What kind of human man is that? It was clearly a humanoid ancient monster. The Dark Elf captain raised his head with difficulty, looked at Kyle, who was not far away with his hands clasped, and spoke intermittently, giving instructions. Everyone, shoot, shhhhhh. Immediately, dozens of blue laser beams shot towards Kyle, interweaving into a terrifying light network for a while. Obviously, facing such a situation, the Dark Elves had to ignore Jane and launch an offensive. Gravitational traction, the highest multiple. Kyle lifted his hands up, and before the laser beam reached his body, it kept shifting towards the sky, and turned a sharp corner above his head in a thrilling manner. Are laser beams useless? Then try this. The Dark Elf captain gritted his teeth, and suddenly threw a grenade-like object with a flashing red light towards the front after it was activated. Fall down. Seeing this, many Dark Elves instinctively squatted down and fell to the ground. That is, Kyle narrowed his eyes, sensing a hint of danger in it, and couldn't help constructing an air wall with repulsive force, placing it in front of him for all-round defense. Just after this simple emergency measure, the grenade exploded in midair, between Kyle and the Dark Elf. It can be seen that a large group of strange and dazzling black holes exploded out of thin air, and then everything within a radius of 10 meters, including wind, sand, stones, light, and even gravitational air, were all swallowed inside. The powerful explosives, regardless of friend or foe, not only swallowed up Kyle's temporary air wall and repulsion field, but also directly inhaled a few Dark Elves from his own side who had no time to evade, and collapsed into flesh. The Kixwin black hole lasted for a full 5 seconds. After the end, the swallowed things disappeared automatically, and everything on the scene returned to its original appearance. Just now, what happened? Jane sneaked out her little head from behind Kyle. The high-tech weapons developed by the Dark Elves far exceeded her imagination as a graduate student in Earth astronomy. Did the Dark Elf's bomb, including its repulsive force, be absorbed and destroyed? Kyle looked at the Dark Elves who had regained their freedom of movement. He had the impression of the black hole bomb just now, as if he had drawn it a long time ago, and finally used it to break out of the encirclement during the battle with the Japanese army. It's just that the power of that bomb is far higher than the one just now. Take advantage of this opportunity and move forward. The captain of the Dark Elves waved forward, and continued to press forward with a group of Dark Elves. Who dares? At this moment, there was a loud noise in the sky, and a huge monster crashed down, blocking Kyle's body abruptly, raising a burst of dust like a small hurricane. What is it this time? The Dark Elf captain's face froze, and he looked up. In front of him was a robot standing on 2 limbs. It was 25 meters high and nearly 7 meters wide. Who dares to take action on my master with the Transformers of WoW EC 2.0 Evolution version here? Weiss grinned, raised his mechanical hands, and opened a laser cannon hole with a radius of 1 meter. Compared with the high-tech firearms in the hands of the Dark Elves, they were as weak as Millet Plus rifles. What's the point of asking a group of young men to serve as cannon fodder? Don't you dare to do it yourself if you haven't figured out my strength. Kyle shook his head, raised his golden eyes, looked past Weiss and the Dark Elf Legion, and landed on Malekith, the leader of the Dark Elf clan, 100 meters away. Malekith still looked indifferent, as if the life and death of the Dark Elf had nothing to do with him. For him, anyone is just a pawn in the chess game leading to victory, and he will not place too much emotion on it. Thor and the Cursed Warrior are still fighting fiercely. Sometimes Thor is dragged and blown away, and sometimes the Cursed Warrior is blown away by the electric shock. It is by no means a matter of 1 or 2 minutes to decide the outcome the other side. Somewhere in the dark world, a giant spaceship in the shape of a candy circle is breaking through the fog and swam towards the battle situation of Kyle and others. The Master said that the ether particles must be obtained, then no matter what the cost, those who stand in my way will be killed. On the bridge of the spaceship, there are only 2 creatures with strange shapes communicating in low voices. They are like top predators standing on the pyramid of the universe, and they exude a palpitating oppressive aura. Thanos General, coming soon. Ruins on the sandy battlefield. The battle between Weiss and the Dark Elf Legion was on the verge of breaking out. In an instant, the laser light cannons bombarded each other, turning a 50-meter radius into scorched blackened earth. Kyle blocked the aftermath with repulsion, and noticed that Jane retreated due to panic, and couldn't help saying, "Be careful, don't leave me 5 meters away." Jane, who had walked a few meters, stopped in time, and just as she was taking a breath, a cloud of space mist suddenly appeared under her feet, causing her to fall directly. Even if it is not in the double star form, Kyle's reaction is still extremely fast, but just as he turned around, he stretched out his hand like lightning to Jane, but Jane was still teleported away by the space fog, allowing Kyle's hands to grab nothing. That's the cosmic Rubik's Cube. Kyle's pupils contracted slightly, probably only with the power of the space gem, which was so fast that he didn't have time to react. The space gems are closely guarded on the Earth, so there's only the Rubik's Cube in the hands of Loki. It's just that Loki just cheated away the ether particles from the future Captain America the day before, and now he kidnapped his brother's girlfriend. This is because he thinks he has 2 infinity gems, so that people are drifting away, and he is doing something crazy? Chapter 487 The Battle Between Ether and Space Stone. In the dark world, on the ruins of a battlefield. Where did you hide that woman? The Dark Elf captain, who was still fighting with Weiss, couldn't help being anxious after seeing Jane disappear out of thin air, and shouted at Kyle, who was more than 10 meters away. Kyle turned his head and stared at the Dark Elf captain coldly. That chilling gaze made the Dark Elf captain feel as if he had fallen into an icehouse, and all subsequent words were stuck in his throat. If Kyle was just playing with the mentality before, now he is really a little angry. That fellow Loki actually abducted Jane entrusted by Solto in front of his face. The anger that was about to erupt in his heart could not be vented by Loki, it could only be vented by the Dark Elf who hit the muzzle of the gun in front of his eyes. "You guys, damn it," Kyle whispered softly, and suddenly stretched out his right palm forward, and as he held it firmly with 5 fingers, colorful flames immediately ignited between his fingers, and the double star energy wrapped the entire right arm. Kyle, who has been practicing to control the double star form, can already control the power precisely in the local area without undergoing whole body changes, and extract enough double star power for use. That is, Malekith, who was standing 100 meters away and hadn't made a move all this time, saw the change in Kyle's right arm, his eyes suddenly shrank, and a turbulent wave arose in his heart. It's so similar, it's like getting a powerful boost from the energy of the infinite gemstone. Malekith also used the ether particles 1,000 years ago, so he knows how exaggerated the increase in the power of infinite gems is to life. It's just that the power used by the human man in front of him doesn't seem to be borrowed from the infinite gems, but is completely his own derived power. How can that be? Malekith is unbelievable that humans can have the same power as the infinity stones. Dangerous? That human is very dangerous? His aura has completely changed. The Dark Elves who were close to Kyle could more intuitively feel the extremely destructive and terrifying aura overflowing from Kyle's right hand. The target person is gone. Retreat first. Retreat. The Dark Elf captain made a decisive decision and immediately issued an order to retreat, but he was still a step too late after all. "Since you're here, Don't leave. Kyle opened his right fist again, made a gun shape with his hand, and made a sword shape with his middle finger, and quickly aimed at the captain of the Dark Elf. The energy of the double stars began to flow and condense, and when the energy was concentrated on the tip of the two fingers, it began to emit extremely dazzling bright stars. Call out. Kyle's right hand trembled slightly, and he emitted a beam of laser light with his two fingers. This beam of laser light condensed the energy of two stars, and at an astonishing speed than ordinary laser light, it spanned a distance of 30 meters in an instant, and the laser shot penetrated the Dark Elf captain's body, the back of the head. The Dark Elf captain's body froze, and before he could react, his entire head was evaporated into a ball of air, and he fell down on the sand as a headless corpse. And this is just the beginning. Kyle's golden pupil was indifferent, and his right hand continued to swing, aiming at the Dark Elves respectively. His two fingers continuously shot out beams of strange laser light, just like the fresh life harvested by the Death Scythe. But for a while, not even one person could be spared. The corpses of nearly 30 Dark Elves fell in disorder on the battlefield. The faces of the corpses that were not headshots still maintained expressions of horror and despair. Under the huge disparity in strength between each other, such unilateral crushing and killing often occur just like an elephant. One step down is a disaster for ants. The game, should it be over, Kyle stepped forward, towards the pale-faced Malekith. Malekith couldn't help stepping back. At this moment, he seemed to hear something, and turned sideways inexplicably. A cloud of space fog exploded in the air there at the same time. A small group of red turbid mist flowed out from the mist of space, and penetrated into Malekith's body through the pores. Call out. A beam of colorful laser light came from a distance, spanned a distance of, meters, penetrated Malekith's left shoulder, then reached the red mist, and then extended into the mist of space. A painful grunt came from the space fog, and the space fog quickly dissipated in the air. I don't know how many light years away, on a certain planet in the starry sky of the universe. The scream startled countless birds in the forest. Loki knelt on the ground with a pale face. He held the Rubik's Cube with his right hand, and clenched his left hand into a fist to stop the bleeding gushing blood. Deserved. Not far from where Loki was injured, Jane was sitting on a rock, sarcastically towards Loki. Loki gasped and looked at the blood hole on his left hand. It's dangerous, it's dangerous. It was almost pierced through the heart. That man is really a monster. With warning, he was faster than the power of the original Space Stone, however, it was finally successful. Part of the power of the ether was sent to Malekith, and there will be a good show to watch. Loki showed a slightly forced evil smile. You are really bad. Jane frowned deeply, looking at Loki with contempt. Loki couldn't take it anymore, and growled at Jane. What do you know? I'm saving you. If you stay there, 10 lives won't be enough for you, in the dark world. Or let him run away. Kyle calmly withdrew his two fingers and looked at Malekith, sensing the familiar destructive energy from him. Ether particle? That's right, it's this power. After so many years, it's still back. There was blood in his eyes, and Malekith laughed wildly, spreading his hands out, the red energy looming in and out of his body. The increase was added to the already powerful body of the elf, and the violent breath made the surrounding sand and dust wreak havoc. With the power of gemstones, who is afraid of whom? The current Malekith is not only inflated in strength, but also inflated in self-confidence. He dares to fight Kyle head-on. If you want to challenge the master, pass me first. With a roar, Weiss rushed forward at a faster speed, coupled with the propulsion of the engine on his back, making it crash into Malekith like a battleship. It came just right. Malekith was still laughing wildly, and when he moved his feet, a powerful explosion erupted immediately behind him, and he disappeared from the spot. So fast. Wissy felt startled in his heart. Looking around, he couldn't see the opponent's figure, but Malekith teleported to him, and slapped the chest shell fiercely. Under the impact of the power of the ether, the steel texture was directly shattered. Wissy's huge mechanical body was split into 4 or 5 pieces, and countless parts were scattered on the ground. Malekith didn't stop, and continued to fly towards Kyle on the hillside at a high speed, kicking up dust along the way. He incidentally blasted a punch of etheric power, but was blocked by a palm that ignited the flame. Ether in space, the collision of two joule-like energies, is like the violent reaction of sodium and water together. Boom! The energy tide swept across and impacted on both sides, kicking up dust all over the sky. Thor and the cursed warrior who were still fighting were all affected and thrown out. If you want to fight, Then do as you wish. In the tide of energy, with silver hair flowing, Kyle opened his eyes little by little. He grabbed Malekith's fist, and his whole body was ignited with holy and powerful blazing flames. Double star form. Chapter 488. The 9 worlds converge, the battlefield switches. At this very moment, far away from the dark world, the Earth of the human world. London. In the bustling downtown area, it was still 12 o'clock in the morning, but the sky was shrouded in black clouds, and the darkness was falling down, with signs of a typhoon or thunderstorm coming. Seeing that the weather was not right, most citizens on the street began to enter the house to take refuge. Only a group of people with technological equipment walked out against the crowd. It is Jane's astronomical research team Daisy, Jane's new assistant, and Dr. Eric, an old scientist with a Mediterranean bald head. Quick! You two, quickly take the equipment and follow me. Eric kept waving back and walked anxiously at the front. Daisy and his new assistant behind him, carrying scientific instruments similar to receivers, followed closely behind. When the three of them walked out of the square, a flock of white pigeons just flew overhead, circling abruptly in the low air in the strong wind. The moment the white pigeons were about to hit the building, ripples appeared in the air, and the white pigeons disappeared into the ripples. And at the next moment, the group of white pigeons appeared inexplicably from the sky 100 meters away. Professor Eric, did you see that one just now? Daisy looked at the flock of white pigeons that appeared and disappeared in the sky with a ghostly expression. I see. That's exactly what I've been looking for in the past few years. Eric took a deep breath, looked up at the sky above the black clouds, and said solemnly, it is said that every 1,000 years, there will be a gathering of celestial bodies. At that time, different worlds will be connected, and the border will become blurred. The new assistant looked at Eric dumbfounded, and couldn't help saying, Professor, aren't you a scientist? Why do you believe in myths and legends? Before Eric could answer, Daisy sighed and said helplessly, if you saw Thor flying in the sky, the hammer that summoned thunder, and all kinds of magic, you would also be superstitious. Daisy paused, and continued to ask, so, Professor Eric, when will the collection of celestial bodies you refer to officially start? No, not when. Eric shook his head, looked at the tiny holes gradually opening in the sky, and said firmly, now, the collection of celestial bodies is already in progress. In the dark world, the battlefield is low. One light spot was like an extremely gorgeous comet, and another strange red light spot collided with a needle tip against the wheat awning at the astonishing speed of randomly generating sonic booms, and then each flew out backwards. In the middle of the collision center, the two gemstone energies violently collided and erupted, causing waves of energy tides and explosive waves to continuously sweep and wash outward. Thor and the cursed warrior directly below were also affected, constantly eating sand. In the harsh environment, the two hugged each other fiercely and wrestled fiercely. When they rolled down a sandy slope, with a wave of ripples, Thor and the cursed warrior jumped out of the original battlefield, at the same time disappear above the low altitude. Kyle didn't notice the situation of Soul and the cursed warrior. His whole body was burning with raging double star energy. Under the dazzling and scorching light, he looked like a Superman made of energy. His body had its own engine brake to stop the impact abruptly. The aftermath stopped in the air. Not to be outdone, Malekith fell to the ground, surrounded by powerful ether energy, causing a black sandstorm, and quickly stood up without incident. Malekith looked at Kyle ferociously, stepped on the ground suddenly, and the whole hill collapsed rumblingly, and he bounced back into the sky like a cannonball. Reality gems are existences that distort reality and fantasy, so in terms of increased physical strength alone, ether energy is still slightly higher than space energy of course. The speed blessing of space energy is far from comparable to that of ether energy. 6 infinite gems, each with its own characteristics. Not bad. The warm-up is officially over, and the real battle is next. Looking at Malekith flying towards him, the corners of Kyle's mouth raised slightly, and he clenched his fists vigorously. As soon as his hands were ready to punch, he turned into a colorful streamer and swooped down. Near the speed of light, the distance of hundreds of meters can only be reached in an instant. Kyle's fists landed on Malekith's chest, and he kept going down against the opponent, crashing towards the sand below. Just before touching the ground, Kyle and Malekith disappeared together with a ripple. The dark world, which was originally a fierce battle situation, suddenly became extremely silent. Only the wind and sand continued to howl and wreak havoc. Rustle. Under a pile of tattered steel parts in the sand, a small mechanical arm stretched out, and the intelligent creature we see crawled out from underneath. Wissy climbed onto the steel parts and looked at the area where no one was seen. Even his intelligent thinking was a little bit unresponsive. Weiss muttered to himself, "Where are people? Master, Soul, and enemies? Where did they go? Globe, London." The three of Eric were still following the detection equipment in the square, but a thunderbolt fell from the sky, and then a blonde man in silver armor and a humanoid monster in bone armor hugged each other and rolled from the sky. It fell straight on the fountain in the square, splashing countless water splashes, scaring many pedestrians nearby to scream. "Professor, look, it's Soul." Daisy recognized one of them and shouted in surprise. The young assistant, the new assistant, was horrified. Where did they fall from? "It can't be God's domain." Eric manipulated the equipment and said seriously, "Not only them, but also, there's a bigger energy flow approaching." The voice just fell. Kyle put his fists against Malekith's chest, and suddenly appeared high above the square, like a hot red meteorite, slanted down and hit the museum. Half of the seemingly solid building was reduced to ruins, and many people screamed fleeing around. The battleship graveyard in the Dark World, and the London city of the human world, the two areas are almost seamlessly connected, so the battle continued. "Drink." Thor waved Thor's hammer and flew the cursed warrior, hunting in the red cloak, and was about to strike again, but disappeared out of thin air in the next moment, leaving Thor's hammer on the fountain in a daze. "This is back to Earth." The inexplicable switch of the space position. Kyle looked at the familiar street scenes and humans around him, and he was also a little confused. Suddenly, he had a flash of inspiration and recalled the theory of the convergence of celestial bodies that Odin had said earlier. In this short period of time, the 9 realms of Marvel have been connected for a long time. Without waiting for Kelder to think about it, Malekith, who was blasted into the underground hole, jumped up with a storm of gravel and dust. Kyle's eyes turned cold, energy and strength condensed in his hands, and he continued to collide fist to fist. Energy to energy held on with Malekith in just a few seconds. Houses in central London collapsed and were damaged one after another, and the area within a radius of, meters was repeatedly ravaged by the aftermath of the battle. The three of Eric were in a mess in the wind, looking at the doomsday scene that was better than special effects. What is a fight between gods? This is the real fight between gods. Chapter 489 London Battlefield. New York, Stark Industries headquarters, inside the chairman's office. Tony Stark, wearing casual clothes, was lying comfortably on the reception sofa. He seemed to be resting with his eyes closed, but he opened his eyes a little, secretly looking towards the office chair. Pepper Potts in a white suit. Paws buried his head in his work on the desk, signed the document skillfully, and without raising his head, he said flatly, "Tony, don't look at me with your lewd eyes. It's working time now, and this is still the office, ahem. Thinking about it this way, it feels even more exciting." Tony coughed a few times and said in surprise, "How do you know I'm looking at you?" "So, you were really looking at me lewdly just now." Paws raised his head, rolled his eyes at him, and asked, "Why haven't you taken Peter to play recently? He's about to enter high school, and I don't have that much time recently." Tony snorted softly, rolled his eyes, and lost his mind. This Potts did not deny that since the battle between Tony and the Godfather a few days ago, he has been thinking about making something in the exclusive studio. Did he? At this moment, Tony's cell phone rang suddenly, and Jarvis' voice prompted, "Sir, it's Peter, the little spider. What is the kid going to do?" Having said that, Tony let Jarvis get through the communication. As soon as the phone was connected, Peter's eager voice sounded, "Mr. Stark, do you watch TV? TV? What TV?" Tony froze for a moment. Peter continued, "You turn on the TV now, any news channel, you kid." Tony frowned slightly, but still gave instructions to Jarvis. "Jarvis, turn on the TV in the office and switch to any news channel." "Yes, sir." As soon as Jarvis finished speaking, the built-in LCD screen on one side of the office wall turned on. On the New York News Channel, the hostess sat in front of the stage with a serious face, and said in fluent English, "Our TV station just received an urgent report. Just 5 minutes ago, local people were trapped in the Museum Exhibition Square in London, entering a catastrophic battle situation. From it, it seems that there are superheroes such as the symbol of peace and Thor, Godfather, and Soul." Tony narrowed his eyes slightly. He who was half lying on the sofa had already sat up tensely, and walked a few steps closer to the LCD screen. "Now, It's up to local journalists to do the video broadcast for us. After the hostess finished speaking, she switched the video to a local reporter. The scene changed, and the male reporter was standing on the side of the square, holding a microphone in horror. The background was the ruins of the street still billowing smoke and flames, and pedestrians were screaming and fleeing everywhere. The male reporter reported in a panic, "Friends in the audience. I am a reporter from London, and I am standing next to the central square in London. You can clearly see that 5 minutes ago, the streets of London were still peaceful and bustling, but now 5 minutes later, it has become a horrible ruin. According to my visual observation just now, the peace symbol and Thor are fighting fiercely with an alien enemy. It's just that their whereabouts are erratic. They were still fighting here half a minute ago, and suddenly they all disappeared." Before the male reporter finished speaking, a small silver hammer flew past behind him at high speed. Immediately afterwards, the cursed warrior and Thor emerged from the side about 10 meters away at the same time, and fell and rolled on the asphalt road, causing a pothole. The two were just fighting with fists and kicks, but they were like space beasts, easily affecting and flying many parked cars on the road. The camera finally freezes on the male reporter with a frightened face, avoiding a car wrapped in strong winds, and then the screen is blurred, and the video camera quickly turns back to the female host. The hostess patted her chest and said in shock, "The signal from the London reporter has been cut off from the TV station. I hope they are fine, and I hope that London can get through this crisis like New York half a year ago." The second difficulty, enough, Tony pressed with his left hand, and Jarvis understood what he meant and turned off the TV screen. "Tony, have the Godfather and the others encountered any trouble?" Pizzillo looked at Tony worriedly. "It's still not clear. But even the Godfather's attack failed to solve it in time, which shows that this time the enemy is very difficult." When Tony said this, he lowered his head a little, only to realize that the communication hadn't been hung up yet. Peter's inquiry sounded on the phone. "Mr. Stark, do you need me to help? Just stay in New York obediently for me. It's time to start school, don't run around. Otherwise, I'll complain to Aunt May." Tony hung up the phone, thought for a while, and said to Potts in a deep voice, "Sorry, it seems I can't go to dinner with you." Potts did not dissuade him, nodded and said, "Be careful yourself, and be sure to pay attention to safety." Of course, Tony agreed, and while walking towards the open floor-to-ceiling windows of the office, he gave instructions to Jarvis. "Jarvis, send a new set of armor, it's urgent." "Yes, sir." A troubled autumn, Tony came to the floor-to-ceiling window on his own, and a dozen or so steel parts flew out of the window, fitting them on his body. After a few seconds, the engines on the palms and soles of the feet hummed and started, and an Iron Man painted in gold and red turned into a streamer and flew towards the sky in the direction of London at supersonic speed. Tony, Posey came to the floor-to-ceiling window, put his hands on his chest, and watched the Iron Man's back until it completely disappeared from sight. At this time, London. On the central square, a burst of ripples caressed gently. Kyle, burning with the energy of powerful devil stars, rushed out of the void, stepped on the grass with both feet, and fisted with his right hand Malekith, who could be used as a locked target, was randomly teleported. "Is it coming again? Can you let people finish this battle well?" Kyle is also a little helpless. The surface of London is fine, as long as it is 10 meters up in the air. The space boundary has become blurred. As long as creatures pass by there, they will be randomly teleported to a certain place in the 9 realms. In the 5-minute battle just now, Kyle and Malekith have switched back and forth at least 10 places, that is, switching battle places every half a minute. Coming, Kyle's mind suddenly moved. He looked up and looked straight ahead, and there was another ripple in the air, which made him clench his right fist in advance. Sure enough, with a caress of the ripples, a tall and burly figure emerged from it. Huh? Kyle was stunned, remembering that Malekith was not that tall. This burly figure. Could it be? Next moment, the cursed warrior in bone armor jumped out of the air with a low growl. It raised its hands above its head, and was about to trample and hammer down, but when the cursed warrior saw clearly the flaming figure in the front and bottom, its movements froze immediately. "This is wrong." "No, you chose the right one, dead end." Kyle smiled brightly, and quickly punched out his right fist, blasting through the bone armor of the cursed warrior with just one blow, setting off waves of light and air, blood and broken bones splashing everywhere. Chapter 490. The enemy strikes. The battle continues. Boom! The cursed warrior bowed his body, bleeding from his mouth, and flew backwards, knocking down the artistic stone sculptures in the central square and street lamps, plowing a 50-meter-long trench on the road, and finally passed out on the ruined wall with his head tilted beside. A burst of spatial ripples passed quietly, and the cursed warrior disappeared from the spot, and he was randomly teleported to nowhere. Get rid of one first, Kyle didn't care, and peacefully withdrew his right fist, which was able to severely injure the elite of the Dark Elves, the cursed warrior, which was within his expectations. After all, after the battle with Soul just now, the cursed warrior has exhausted his physical strength in 7s and 88, coupled with the advanced accumulation of double star energy. No matter who is caught off guard, it will be difficult for anyone to suffer the energy shock of the same level as the Infinity Gem. Can't bear it. Wait. Where are Malekith and Thor? Where are they? Kyle raised his head in surprise and looked towards the sky. His pupils shrank suddenly in the next moment. It was London's originally dark cloud-covered sky. At this time, a shocking tornado storm occurred. The giant storm I could see several strange world holes, no more, no less, just 8, and the 8 holes were stacked together like wormhole hamburgers. This is the real collection of celestial objects. Kyle narrowed his eyes solemnly, and through the hole in the eye of the wind, he could vaguely see the supreme god realm surrounded by stars, the dark world shrouded in wind and sand and mist, the frost world of ice and snow, the scorching red flame world, and the world without any, the dead world of signs of life and more. The territory ruled by God's domain is divided into 9 realms, each of which can be regarded as an independent world, with boundary walls, and does not invade or disturb each other on weekdays. Among them, both the Earth and the Galactic Federation belong to the human world, and they are also the most prosperous and prosperous civilization areas in the 9 realms. God's domain has been committed to maintaining the balance of the 9 realms for thousands of years, expelling the ancient forces such as frost giants and dark elves who intend to invade across the borders from the territory of the human world. It's a pity that the 9 realms must be divided for a long time, and they must be divided for a long time. Thinking about it would be a long way off, but just judging from the speed at which celestial bodies converge, Kyle got a very bad news. The influence of God's domain on the 9 realms is infinitely weakening, but the strength of God's domain can still be traced back to Odin's original source. Father of the gods, Odin. Is he dying soon? Kyle whispered to himself. Thunder suddenly fell from the sky, the rumbling was deafening, and the thunder and lightning split the sky straight into 2. Just saying this sentence, the world seems to tremble. On the other side, the dark world. Thor suddenly emerged from midair, fell under the dune, and kept rolling down the slope. He opened his right hand and was constantly calling Thor's hammer, but the Thor's hammer, which was still in London on Earth, obviously needed a certain delay if it wanted to travel from one world to another. Soul rolled all the way to the bottom of the hill, and finally stopped. While spitting out the sand in his mouth, he looked around, trying to find the figure of the cursed warrior. Call. A burst of ripples caressed from the side, and then, a figure emerged from it, with sharp horns, white bone armor, and a burly figure. If it's not a cursed warrior, who is it? Soul's eyes widened seriously, his hands were clenched into fists, and just as he was about to face off, he saw the cursed warrior turn over and lie unconscious on the sands 5 meters away in the shape of a large character. Pretend to be dead. Thor raised his eyebrows in doubt, and took a step forward, and saw that the cursed warrior's mouth and nose were covered with the blood bubbles, his upper body was full of cracks, his chest was severely collapsed, and there was a small fist in the middle print. Seeing this scene, Soul's doubts turned into a wry smile. It is estimated that the entire 9 realms will be able to beat an opponent he could not deal with after dozens of rounds of hard work, into such a state of being seriously injured and half useless in a few seconds. Can't find out how many. Kyle, how did you kill my opponent? Soul scratched his hair irritably. Just at this moment, a figure fell from the ripples above the hillside directly in front of him. The roar descended on the top of the sand dune, instantly setting off gravel and dust all over the sky. Okay, Soul quickly covered his mouth and nose, and after the sand and dust passed by, he looked towards the hill again. It can be seen that Malekith is standing on the top, wrapped in ether energy, and looking down at him with cold eyes. By the way, my opponent is you. Malekith. Soul shuddered, letting the anger raging in his chest, swung his right hand back suddenly, and just opened his 5 fingers. The Thor's hammer, which had shuttled so far, finally flew back to his hand from a distance. The hammer was still slightly hot. It's ridiculous. How can you beat me in my current state? Malekith sneered, raised his hands, and the red mist drove up billowing dust, forming an energy storm around him. Why? Because I can hold this hammer, because there is lightning flowing in my body. Thor's electric eyes were piercing, and he stepped forward firmly. Under the grip of Thor's hammer, the crackling thunder and lightning entangled the whole body and the hammer, allowing others to hammer. No, the combination of human and electricity. Today, only one of us can leave here alive. The red cloak moved around like a supreme king, soul set in an extremely domineering manner. London, a messy central square. Before Kyle could wait for Malekith to teleport back, the sound of an engine came from the sky behind him. Looking back, he saw the familiar Iron Man flying towards this side at supersonic speed, leaving a trail of airwaves behind him, and finally thumped. It landed beside him with a thud. Kyle looked at each other, smiled and said, "Tony, Godfather." Iron Man opened the steel mask, revealing Tony's bearded face. He looked around and asked incredulously, "What's going on?" "I just flew into the sky above the outskirts of London, and then inexplicably appeared on the London subway. After the subway came out, it was teleported to the vicinity of the London Tower, and it took several places before it came to you. It's hard to say. But you are lucky not to be teleported to other worlds." Kyle shrugged and gestured to the top of his head. When Tony looked up and saw the strange scene of celestial bodies gathering, he couldn't help but gasped. That hole couldn't be Loki making it again. Loki was the first thing Tony thought of. Kyle shook his head and said, "No. Even the Rubik's Cube in his hand cannot connect the 9 realms." Tony wondered, "So how do we block it?" "For the time being, there's only one way. Wait for it to disappear by itself." Kyle's response was straightforward. A gathering of celestial bodies, like a lunar eclipse, is a mysterious phenomenon formed by natural laws and will not exist for a long time. "So, we are here to guard." Tony has been looking at the space hole, but suddenly saw a mechanical spaceship similar to a donut, breaking through from one of the worlds to the London side of the Earth. Tony thought he had seen it wrong at first, but after blinking, he was sure that the things in front of him were not hallucinations or illusions. Tony looked at the interstellar spaceship emerging from the bottom of the hole. His face turned pale for a moment, and he said in a trembling voice, "Godfather, you can't be wrong. It is a spaceship of this shape. It is the same as the last time it attacked us and took away Gamora and Luo. Na is the same alien force." Chapter 491. The key to opening the treasure of the body. No need for Tony to explain. Kyle has already recognized it. This large donut-shaped spaceship is undoubtedly the standard alien warship of the Thanos Legion, belonging to the alien forces of Thanos. Because of the fact that Lorna was forcibly taken away, Kyle hadn't settled with Thanos yet, but he didn't expect that its people would come to their door by themselves, blatantly entering their home ground on Earth. I don't know whether to say that Thanos is too confident or too stupid. The interstellar spacecraft landed straight from the space hole where the celestial bodies gathered, and the huge wind wheel in the middle, which was used as the main engine inside and outside the spacecraft, constantly pulled and shattered the surrounding high-altitude clouds and fog, and began to absorb the surface oxygen of the city of London, prompting blowing on the streets of the city below. With a strong wind, garbage items such as plastic bags and papers were the first to fly into the sky. Pedestrians who saw the appearance of the alien spaceship couldn't help screaming and fleeing in horror, and a large number of abandoned cars blocked the road. Looking at the large spacecraft that was getting closer and the strong wind that made his hair stand on end, Tony reminded seriously, "Godfather, I know you are very angry now, but you'd better not make a move first. If you are not careful, blow up the alien spaceship, and the central city of London will be completely gone." There are good and bad home games. Well, naturally there is a sense of reinforcement at any time, and they are familiar with the environment. The bad thing is that they will be timid when they fight, for fear of accidentally injuring fellow human beings. They can't completely let go of the fight. Kyle nodded in agreement, and said indifferently, "Of course I know this. If it weren't for the consideration that this is the city of London, and the space ripples caused by the convergence of celestial bodies exist everywhere, how could they still fly over my head safely and soundly, in front of the double star form? Any civilization-level spaceships and warships are just a pile of target-like scrap copper and rotten iron. In terms of speed, spaceships and warships have reached the speed of light, which is considered the peak of technological level, but the double star form can break through to exceed the speed of light. In terms of energy, spaceships and fighters are at most only solar level, and the energy intensity of the double star form derived from infinite gems can easily reach to cosmic level. The double star form seems to be an extraordinary power that exists to surpass technological civilization. Tony took a deep breath nervously, and pondered, let me think of a way. Is there any way to avoid being forcibly teleported away, and prevent the enemy from attacking the interstellar spaceship? Hearing Tony's words, Kyle's heart moved. By the way, he did have that method, but it was a pity that he lost it a long time ago, and needed a key to open it. Just as Kyle thought about this, there was a sudden abnormal sound not far behind him. He and Tony looked back together, and saw dots of sparks on the surface rotating into wheels, and a circular portal was built at a speed visible to the naked eye. Finish. First a foot stepped out of it, and then a fat white man in a brown robe with a beard, holding a short staff, came to the central square from the other side of the portal. Who are you? Tony asked in surprise. Just add me, King, Wang replied to Tony, then looked at Kyle, and said seriously, Mr. Kyle, the Supreme Sorcerer asked me to come here. I almost forgot about your existence. Kyle pointed to the falling alien spacecraft behind him, and said coldly, this is definitely an alien invasion, right? So, Guyi is going to join the battle this time. No. Wang shook his head and said, the Supreme Mage has more important things to do, and she said that you can handle this crisis completely. What is this? Kyle's eyes turned cold, and he looked at Wang with disdain. Then what are you doing here? Cheer us up, Guyi, the Guardian of the Earth, is too casual, right? The Supreme Master has something for me to convey to you. Wang didn't procrastinate. He directly took out a small box from his pocket, and after handing it to Kyle, he turned and walked towards the still rotating Mars portal, as if there was no reason to stay. Wang paused, and finally left a sentence. The Supreme Mage also asked me to convey a sentence to you at the same time. She said, Stephen Strange is already a member of our temple. I hope you will not be too much intervene, and the contents of that box shall be taken as proof of friendship in our temple. As soon as he finished speaking, Wang stepped over the circular portal and disappeared from the square with little Mars. After the king left, Tony asked Kyle, Godfather, who is that man called the king just now? And, you were discussing the mage and the temple just now? Kyle didn't speak, his eyes drifted, and then he turned to God and said softly, Tony, you will know in the near future that the earth is not as simple as you think, and there are still many supernatural forces that have not yet surfaced in the secular world. Then I'll wait and see. Tony nodded receptively, looked at the small box in Kyle's hand, and asked with great interest, then what did he bring? You won't know until you open it. Kyle smiled lightly, and blew lightly on the box on his palm. The divine flame perfectly controlled the outer box and burned the outer box into flying ash. The ashes were blown out of the palm along the way, revealing a strange shiny black finger inside. It is strange, mainly because rings are usually worn on one finger, but the palm in front of him is suitable for two fingers. Kyle, who has always been calm and steady, saw the strange ring in his hand. His body still trembled involuntarily, and his shoulders trembled slightly with unconcealed excitement. The ring sent by Wang on behalf of the Supreme Mage is not an artifact, but it is better than an artifact, and it is also the exclusive key that Kyle has been missing. Godfather. They're down, and we must do something about it, Tony on the side spoke solemnly. Kyle looked forward and saw that the donut spaceship had dropped 2 meters. The super forceful power and wind pressure generated could almost absorb and sweep away people. Because of this, did someone send this thing to me? Kyle was thoughtful, and understood the intention of Master Guyi. Although this still could not be changed, he regarded Guyi as a bad impression of the shopkeeper. Since this is what you want to see, then I will do as you wish, as long as you don't regret it in the future, Kyle murmured in a low voice, putting the strange ring on the second finger of his left hand. The moment he put the ring on, Kyle felt a familiar force clearly flowing into his body from the outside world through soul resonance. So at the same time, in Kyle's body, the few ability cards that had been dim for many years finally returned to usable light: portal, mirror space, mono whip, defense, hanging ring. It's been a long time. It's been a long time. Kyle was filled with emotion. Since decades ago, when he shuttled from the Earth to the planet Casa, he lost the hanging ring that it took from a mage, and he didn't put on the hanging ring again until today. A spell ability card that has been unusable in the card space. Just right, let's try it with you. Kyle looked at the spaceship occupying the entire field of vision, and suddenly opened his hands forward, hanging the ring, mana, and ability cards, all of which played their effects and cast a spell. Chapter 492. Boom boom boom. The donut-like large spaceship landed in the city of London, and the bottom immediately crushed several high-rise buildings. The engine windmill stirred up the air and airflow on the street, and all the objects sucked in, including stones, were all ground into dust powder, as if a giant lawnmower was hard at work destroying civilization. A blue circular beam of light shot out from the spaceship and landed on the street directly in front of it, from which two figures of a man and a woman appeared faintly. It wasn't until the light faded away that their appearance was fully revealed. The man was tall and strong, wearing a black cloak, holding a sickle on his shoulder. His ugly face was frighteningly pale. The female was slender and tall, with a set of tight metal armor. The curves of her body were more graceful. It's just that she holds a black spear in her right hand, and her facial complexion is similar to the former's. She seems to belong to the same alien race as the man. No other alien troops showed up, only the two of them stood on the street, exuding a very oppressive atmosphere. The female alien, Proxima Centauri, walked gracefully and lightly, with a cold and scary tone, and said with a sneer, "Could it be that if you come here once, kill all the creatures in the entire civilized city first, and let them know how powerful we are, Master won't be happy about senseless killing? Also, something's not quite right here." The undead general sunk in his eyes and looked around in surprise. Street buildings and abandoned vehicles, etc. Everything is real and not an illusion, but no one can be seen at a glance. The entire central city. No, it should be the entire city. There is no living creature, lifeless, and only the humming sound of their own spaceship still breaking. Not far from the donut spaceship, on the story rooftop of a skyscraper. A drop of sweat fell on his forehead, and Kyle took a long breath. He maintained the movement of spreading his hands, and the glare on the hanging ring disappeared sequentially. Obviously, the spell was successfully cast. "Godfather, what have you done?" Tony, who was wearing a steel battlesuit, opened his mouth wide and stood on the edge of the roof railing in a daze, looking down at the large spaceship hanging in front of him, and the alien man and woman below. The streets and buildings are obviously still the same, but all the people are gone, and all living things seem to have evaporated from the world and do not exist in this world. Looking overhead, Tony was shocked to find that even the spectacle produced by the convergence of celestial bodies was gone. "This is not our original world, like the back of a mirror. It's just a re-engraved parallel mirror world," Kyle explained aloud, and the hand wearing the hanging ring brushed the air, and there was a reflection of the glass, and the original world could be seen through the glass. The streets of London were still in chaos, with people screaming and fleeing on blocked highways. Kyle put down his hands and said tiredly, "I pulled you, me, and the alien spaceship into the mirror space together. It is very difficult to do this. However, there is no celestial body gathering here, and there is no concern for human safety. You can fight as you like." "Yeah, that really couldn't be better." Tony was surprised by the existence of the mirror space, and also put on a steel mask. Fully armed and ready for the next battle. "Tony, were they the ones who attacked you last time?" Kyle pointed down to the undead general in Proxima Centauri standing on the street. Tony shook his head slightly, and said firmly, "No, there are two other people leading the team. One can manipulate any object, just restrained Lorna's ability, very difficult to deal with. The other has a physique and strength no less than the Hulk. Power, with a giant axe, splitting an entire building at will, whether they are or not, they belong to the same force. Tony, let's go down and meet them." With the cold light in Kyle's eyes, without thinking too much, he jumped lightly, and his body fell hundreds of meters from the rooftop. "Yes," Tony responded, turned on the pole engine, followed Kyle's tail, and swooped down the street. "Come on, someone is playing tricks." The undead general seemed to be aware of it, and immediately looked up, looking at Kyle and Tony who fell from the sky. "Whoever dares to block our way, no matter who it is, kill it." Proxima Centauri proudly raised his chin, completely ignoring the humans on Earth. "The power of Thanos is placed in the Galactic Federation, and it is also the top of the first class, not to mention a wild place like the Earth. Tread." Bang! Kyle and Tony used traction repulsion and engine thrust respectively to slow down the falling speed, and landed on the ground 10 meters away from the other side, stirring up a wave of white dust. "Are there strange people and strange men on this Earth?" The general of the undead sized up Kyle and Tony, and his eyes fell on Tony first. After all, the steel suit on Tony was a top-notch technological product. "Be sensible, just hand over the ether particles. We have followed you here from the dark world," Proxima Centauri said bluntly to Kyle in an imperative tone, without concealing his intention to descend on the Earth. Oh, I see. There was a sudden look in Kyle's eyes, and he finally understood the reason why Thanos' troops suddenly came to Earth. They are not for the Earth, but for the ether particles. After coming to the Dark World, they are sent to London by the space flow gathered by the celestial bodies. Tony spread his hands flatly, and said coldly, "Sorry. The Earth is closed today, and you strange aliens are not welcome. You should go home early and eat with that sweet. Is there nothing to discuss?" Proxima and I had a gloomy face, and he squeezed the dark spear tightly in his hand. The tip of the spear was flickering with faint purple energy, and he was about to strike, but was blocked by the Death Blade warrior next to him. Proxima Centauri, wait a minute. The Death Blade warrior looked away from Tony, and focused on Kyle. His pupils focused slightly, a human with silver hair and golden pupils. Don't you think he looks familiar? I seem to have seen him somewhere. He, not just a mere human but, Darky. Proxima casually looked at Kyle, but suddenly froze, looked at him again, and said in surprise, "No way, such a coincidence? He couldn't be the master who reminded us many times to pay more attention, and in the human man who made waves in the Galactic Federation. It should be right." The Death Blade warrior took a deep breath, took a heavy step forward, and said to Kyle, "You have something that was taken from Ronan and originally belonged to us. Is this what you said?" Kyle opened his left hand casually, and a card was drawn out, manifesting into a purple gemstone, lying peacefully on the palm of his hand. Power gem. The eyes of the Death Blade warrior and Proxima Centauri became eager. "If you want to, then come and get it, and if you can get it, I will give it to you." Kyle smiled. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 493 One Person 1. I'll give it to you. Do you dare to come and take it? Kyle's plain but domineering voice echoed subtly in the mirror world of London, and reached the ears of Proxima Centauri and Death Blade warrior, making them feel extremely ear-piercing. Darky Proxima narrowed his eyes, his brown eyes reflected Kyle, flickering very dangerous pupils, turned his head and whispered to the Death Blade warrior, "Be careful, that human man killed Ronan." A human killed Carrie Star Leader Ronan, which not only shocked the entire Galactic Federation, but also spread far beyond the galaxy. It's normal for Ronan, that trash who dared to defy his master, to be killed. Don't worry, I will cut off his hand, remove the power stone, and then cut off his head and give it to the master. The Death Blade warrior snorted coldly, never paying attention to Ronan. It lifted a 2-meter-long sickle in one hand, walked towards Kyle with a cold and oppressive aura, and spit out its slender tongue like a snake letter. With an undisguised killing intent, the Death Blade warrior said coldly to Kyle, "I will never be like Ronan, arrogantly treating you as weak. I will use all my strength to make you my soul under the knife. Remember my name, General Death Blade. This is the name of the person who will kill you. You talk too much nonsense, and I never remember the names of dead people." Kyle was completely unmoved, turned the power gem into a card, and placed it back in the card space. The powerful aura lingering and rising from the opponent's body can definitely be ranked among the top 3 enemies he has ever encountered. It is inevitable to be several times stronger than Ronan, but just stronger than Ronan. There is no need for him to use one of the power gems at the bottom of the box. If the dead Ronan knew that some people would use it as a calculation unit of combat power, one after another, I am afraid that he would not die in peace. Tony. You don't have to pick any more, just one person per person, a quick decision, and you can still fight to go home for dinner. Kyle turned sideways and said to Tony, who was standing aside, "No problem, just leave the other one to me." Tony nodded and looked at Proxima Centauri next to the Death Blade warrior. He naturally knew that among the 2 people present, the Death Blade warrior was the strongest among them, so Kyle locked it as his target from the beginning. The Godfather is always like this, either with one enemy against many, or choose the strongest villain enemy to start. I am Iron Man. If I lose again, the shame on me will never be washed away. Tony was still fighting the last time, failing to defeat the other 2 Thanos soldiers, and letting others take his companion away. "Are you my opponent?" Proxima Centauri Dark Knight smiled and licked his dry lips. "My name is Proxima Centauri Dark Knight, so please give me your advice." Called out, the final sound of the word teaching has not yet fallen. Proxima Centauri suddenly moved, and a white airwave erupted behind it, covering a distance of more than 10 meters in the blink of an eye. Proxima Centauri came to Tony, who was wearing a steel battlesuit. She lowered her body slightly, like a female cheetah baring her fangs, stabbing her chest with black spears in both hands at the same time. What an amazing speed! A flash of surprise flashed in Kyle's eyes, and he could clearly see the opponent's violent intentions and actions, but even so, he still didn't choose to do it. That's the enemy Tony faces. If he always needs to intervene and he can't defeat the powerful villain, then Tony is not an Iron Man who is as good as a mortal. At the moment when the spear fell and pierced the chest, with human eyes, Tony couldn't see the opponent's non-human fast movements in time, but with the assistance of Jarvis's intelligent artificial system and the emergency protection of the steel suit, he still hurriedly raised his left hand to block. Laugh. Proxima Centauri's spear pierced Tony's steel left hand. With a series of sparks and lightning flashes, it was known for its high protection ability. The cold weapon's spear pierced a hole and almost penetrated Tony's inner fragile human arm. Despite this, Tony still suffered a lot of dark losses. The damaged steel left arm was wrapped around the electric light, and it was scrapped after one blow. Jarvis quickly and anxiously sounded the alarm. Sir, the arm on the left hand is completely paralyzed, and the spear has a very strange energy, which can instantly destroy the performance of electronic technology equipment. I see. Tony quickly stretched out his right hand, like iron tongs, and clasped the spear tightly with 5 fingers. The engine assisted the arm to exert strength, so that the spear tip could no longer penetrate into the shell. Nearly. Next time, the hole will be your heart hidden in the steel. Proxima sneered again and again, and continued to rush forward, pushing Tony backwards at high speed. The two crashed into the first floor of the building together, smashing through several reinforced concrete walls and glass windows in succession, and disappeared into the street on the other side behind the building, spreading dust everywhere. After the two left, only Kyle and the Death Blade were left in place. How about going to help? Your companion is going to be killed by Proxima Centauri, the Death Blade warrior said coldly. Kyle shook his head slightly, and said firmly, there is no need for that. He will kill Proxima Centauri, and I will kill you. Is it? General Death Blade was non-committal, stepped lightly, raised the sickle in his hand above his head, and rushed towards Kyle's head in a straight line at a speed far exceeding Proxima Centauri. There are no other bells and whistles to attack, only crisp and neat movements. But under the supersonic superhuman speed and the indescribably pure and powerful slash, the air within a radius of tens of meters exploded chaotically, forming a violent wind with the actions of General Death Blade. Kyle could clearly feel that facing the impending slash, his whole body's skin stood up with cold hairs, as if there were sharp thorns scraping on the skin surface, and the inner alarm bell rang loudly. If he was completely hacked, he might really die. Kyle's heart trembled slightly, but this long-lost sense of threat did not make him feel fear or trembling. On the contrary, it made the blood in his body a little scalding, and the bottom of his heart burned with wisps of fighting spirit. That's right, it's the will to fight. When facing Malekith, who was blessed by ether particles, he was only a little serious, but now General Death Blade made him directly ignite a burning desire to fight. The corner of Kyle's mouth rose quietly, he stepped forward with his left foot, and fell with heavy steps. With his body as the center, the natural gravitational force around him suddenly doubled. Repulsion traction. Okay. General Death Blade was in the air, his face changed slightly, and his originally smooth movements were inevitably sluggish due to the sudden repulsion. He didn't fully approach Kyle, but he still chopped down the sickle that was raised above his head. The gray-black sickle slash from top to bottom formed a crescent moon trajectory, rushing to Kyle's forehead with a sound of breaking wind, and then was blocked by a magic shield. The impact of the bladed sickle and the golden shield caused countless scorching sparks to fly out. The battle has officially started. Chapter 494 Mage N number 039, S Attack Method, Mirror World. Under the defense of the golden gun that emerged from Kyle's left hand, General Death Blade couldn't make a single blow. He just wanted to make a second slash, but Kyle obviously didn't give it a chance. He saw his empty right hand waving forward, a golden streak whiplash wrapped around its wrist. Go with it, Kyle yelled violently, using the unparalleled divine power of the protist blood, nearly 100 times the strength of a human. He pulled the golden magic whip back suddenly, and flung General Death Blade towards the business building behind him. Because of Tony and Proxima Centauri, the first floor at the bottom of that commercial building was completely penetrated long ago, and now it was hit by General Death Blade like a human cannonball, and it suddenly collapsed rumblingly, and the entire London mirror space was in the earthquake shook at this moment. General Deathblade was submerged by the collapsed masonry and concrete, and his figure disappeared into a cloud of dust. Laugh. General Deathblade's gray-black scythe spun a few times in the air, intervening between Kyle and the ruins of the building. The blade was inserted obliquely into the road ground, and the blade was still trembling. Under the sunlight cast by the mirror world, the body of the sickle reflects the dark metallic luster. "Did you even drop your weapon?" Kyle raised his eyebrows slightly, which was a bit beyond his expectation. He just met an opponent who raised his fighting spirit, but the opponent lost his weapon in just a few moves? Without thinking too much, I followed my curiosity and hobby of collecting weapons. Kyle paced forward and reached out to grab the handle of the sickle. His hands were cold, but the mysterious power hidden in the blade burst out suddenly, trying to invade his body along the handle and arm. Kyle's face changed slightly. With his Proteus physique, his arms were almost frozen, and his body functions were facing signs of paralysis. He quickly activated the power of Vulcan. The golden pupils ignited the fire, and the golden flames burned from the inside to the outside, dissipating the cold energy that invaded the body, and in turn spread along the palm of his hand to the black sickle. The sickle seemed to be not just a weapon, but a living creature. Realizing that something was wrong, it automatically broke away from Kyle's shackles, and was not burned by the flames. Flying up from the ground of the road, the sickle rotated at a high speed, forming a gray wind wheel that tore the air, and was pulled into the ruins of the building by some kind of traction. The rotating sickle split through obstacles all the way, and the reinforced concrete was as fragile as tofu until it fell into the hands of General Deathblade, who was buried inside with only one hand exposed. Boom! Waves of rubble and dust swept around, and General Deathblade held his scythe again. Standing up from the ground, his pupils flickered black and looked at Kyle, with an ominous aura of undead lingering all over his body. Can't be wrong. Kyle looked at the sickle held by General Deathblade, and was extremely surprised. That sickle actually has a soul. After connecting people and the source of mana with a hanging ring, Kyle had a more intuitive understanding of spells and souls, and almost instantly judged that what attacked him just now was not the energy contained in the sickle itself, but the evil hidden and attached to the blade's soul body. A weapon with a soul can no longer be regarded as a pure weapon, but is equivalent to a different kind of organism. Among the top weapons that Kyle knows, Thor's hammer, Eternal Flame, Kree Artifact, and even Infinity Gems, etc., only contain special energy and infinite power, and do not form a soul that thinks independently. This is my Death Blade. Under the sharp blade, there are all undead. General Deathblade grinned coldly, held the Deathblade scythe, and continued to swoop forward, facing Kyle, still passing cleanly. Under the slash, the dark blade once formed a black half-crescent light. Kyle's whole body is bathed in golden flames. Usually, when encountering opponents with cold weapons, as long as he turns on the Vulcan form, he will be unscathed even if he is standing and let others fight. After all, the temperature of the inner flame that simply wraps around the body's surface is as high as, degrees Celsius, and the forging materials of many weapons will melt into molten iron at this temperature. But when he got closer, General Deathblade's Deathblade was not only fine, but also slashed directly at Kyle's neck, ignoring the golden flame and high temperature. Feeling the coolness emerging from the neck and the bottom of his heart, Kyle's pupils shrank violently, clapped the palms of both hands together, and two golden flames intertwined into a ball, bursting out and spraying towards General Deathblade's body. High temperature and heat wave are coming. In the end, General Deathblade didn't slash the knife, but stopped temporarily, gently touched the ground with his toes, and his tall and burly figure flipped flexibly in the air, passing over Kyle's head, barely avoiding the bombardment of the bursting flames people in the air. General Deathblade simply threw the sickle down, and the sickle accelerated its rotation, and continued to cut off the back of Kyle's head at a rapid speed. Kyle didn't look back, as if he had eyes behind his back. Ben's closed palm suddenly pushed aside. Accompanied by his movements, all the dust floating in the air bounced away. The scythe spinning into a wind wheel was not bounced off, but within half a meter of Kyle, the speed of slashing and spinning was getting slower and slower, and when the last centimeter was left, the scythe was completely stagnant and stuck in the air at this time. In the area around Kyle, the outward repulsion has formed a dense air wall. Come back, General Deathblade, who landed behind him, waved his hand, and the sickle, like Thor's hammer, automatically flew back towards his direction and fell back into his hand. It's not just an ordinary slash. Kyle turned around, his eyes drooping in thought. He has been defending, trying to test the strength of General Death's blade and the mysteries of the sickle weapon in his hand, which made him more curious and surprised. The slash of General Death's blade just now was not only aimed at the body, but even his soul throbbed just now. The death blade that kills the soul? Interesting. Come again. A smile appeared on the corner of Kyle's mouth, and he raised his left hand wearing the hanging ring, and made an inexplicable seal with his right hand. General Death's blade missed Kyle again and again, and was about to sprint forward in one go, but the road surface suddenly backed up, making it stand still, unable to get any closer to Kyle. It's been a long time since I played this trick. Kyle narrowed his eyes, stretched out his hand and waved down, and the buildings and ground with a radius of hundreds of meters were flipped, reversed, and reorganized in a regular pattern. The ground forms the sky, the buildings form the ground, and the cityscape undergoes strange twists and changes. This is the mirror world, and everything is at the discretion of Kyle, the only mage in the current world. What the hell is going on here? General Death's blade opened his eyes wide in surprise. Kyle, who was standing on the ground in front of him, had come to the floating platform suspended at an altitude of, meters. The nearby skyscrapers are like dense forests, so crowded that the sky turns into a few gaps. Kyle stood on the suspended platform, looking down at the General Death's blade below, and without hesitation put his hands together again. General Death's blade glanced out in shock, and saw the 4 skyscrapers next to them, which were like walls of organs, rumbling and moving closer, trying to crush them into patties. Not that simple. General Death's blade snorted coldly, jumped up on the spot, switched steps constantly, kicked and stepped on the outer walls of the buildings on both sides, and rushed towards Kyle on the suspended high platform. You stole my lines. Kyle shrugged and pressed down with his right hand. Dark shadows enveloped his body. General Death's blade looked up, and suddenly gasped, but a skyscraper turned over and fell towards him, blocking all escape routes. Chapter 495. The Mirror World of London, where the suburbs meet. Following the ripples of the diamond-shaped glass, a bald woman in a yellow robe stepped out and landed on the top of one of the buildings. Behind the bald woman, a cheeky young man in a gray mage uniform followed closely behind to the roof of the building. In the mirror world, the cheeky young man looked at the bald woman in confusion, looked around the inanimate mirror space, and asked in surprise, "That, Master Guyi, I just felt the existence of mana, and I am learning the basics with Master Moto and the others. What about the spell? Why did it suddenly bring me to the mirror world?" The mirror world is a must-learn spell for mages. As a novice mage, he still understands it, but he still can't open the portal leading to it normally. Strange, look over there. The supreme sorcerer Guyi stood on the edge of the roof and pointed out his hand. Strange followed the prompt and looked, his pupils shrank slightly in surprise. It can be seen that 500 meters away, a gold red-painted Iron Man flew up from the ground, one hand flickered with lightning to keep it scrapped, and the other hand kept firing light cannons towards the street below. Carpet bombings broke out one after another. A female alien holding a black spear rushed out of the blast. She kicked the outer wall of the building with a light and flexible body. The spear was thrown out swiftly, almost chilling the Iron Man in the air. Watching the fierce life and death struggle, Strange opened his mouth wide and said in surprise, "That's Iron Man? Who else is there?" Because of Kamataj's isolation from the outside world, the inner mages also focus on cultivation, so apart from the mages who guard the cauldron of all things, few mages pay attention to what is happening in the outside world in a timely manner. Master Guyi said indifferently, "Half an hour ago. Similar to New York last time, a hole was opened above the city of London, and celestial bodies from many realms gathered, and aliens from other worlds came to Earth." "So it is." Strange nodded, touched his chin, and had new doubts. "Then why are they in the mirror space?" "You pulled them in." The ancient master was silent and did not respond. When Strange was surprised, he felt that the whole building, no, it should be the entire London city in the mirror world shaking. "What is that?" Strange quickly looked at the source of the earthquake, which was 600 meters away. The buildings there were like chess pieces, manipulated by invisible hands, and the central city of London was a chessboard that was arbitrarily changed. One after another skyscrapers are like dominoes, following certain rules, rumbling down immediately. It was like a meat grinder, constantly fitting and flipping on the ground. Damn. General Death's blade held the sickle tightly with both hands, and his body twisted extremely quickly, forming a small tornado, which broke through the inner wall of the building at the bottom, raising countless waves of gravel and dust. However, General Deathblade hadn't found the position of Kyle on the high place, and another building was crushed towards it like a bulldozer, which made General Deathblade want to vomit blood depressedly, but he kept hitting the cotton ball with only strength. Hundreds of meters above the sky, Kyle stood on the floating platform decorated with French seals, looking down coldly. His palms kept swinging up and down, left and right, manipulating and changing the architectural space pattern of central London. Buildings are like chess, and the world is like a chessboard. It has to be said that the mage's long-range combat method is inexplicably enjoyable, and Kyle, who is good at melee combat, seems to have opened the door to a new world. Is anyone coming in? While manipulating the mirror space to look at the enemy General Deathblade, Kyle glanced to the side as if aware of it. His gaze swept across a distance of several hundred meters and fell on Gu Yi and Strange standing on the top of the distant building. I didn't participate in the battle, but I brought newcomers to the show. Strange, it's too early to fight. Kyle shook his head and looked back indifferently. That's Mr. Kyle, is it Mr. Kyle? Strange looked at Gu Yi, and after Gu Yi nodded, he said thoughtfully, Mr. Kyle can actually know our Karma Taj spells. No wonder, last time in the hospital, he would ask such questions. Strange question. But why haven't I heard Moto and the others mention Mr. Kyle? Is he my senior brother or uncle? No. Strange, you're wrong. The Ancient One looked at Kyle's figure in the distance, shook his head slightly and said, General Kyle, he has never entered Karma Taj, nor have I taught him spells. Strange opened his mouth wide in surprise. Then why is he so proficient in spells? Speaking of this, we have to go back to 70 years ago. Master Gu Yi had a calm face, and said in memory, at that time, Mr. Kyle was a young major general who was in the limelight. You have a brother who is guarding the New York temple and wants to test General Kyle's ability, so pull him into the mirror space alone, and then, Strange asked curiously. Master Gu Yi said, after half an hour, General Kyle took the hanging ring from your brother, opened the portal of the mirror space, and returned to the real world. Before that, General Kyle didn't know that the Earth was guarded by us. The existence of the mage, real or fake, Strange was taken aback. It took him a full week to barely open the portal, and he is already considered a type with excellent qualifications for Karma Taj. And it only took Mr. Kyle half an hour from getting started to using the portal to freely enter and exit the mirror space? Who believes? Maybe it won't take half an hour. After all, your senior brother fought with General Kyle. When the ancient master said this, he couldn't help but sigh from the bottom of his heart. Strange, you and I have to believe that there are really top geniuses in the world. Know the rules. It took me hundreds of years to practice continuously, and the realm of manipulating the mirror space is not much better than the current General Kyle. There was a faint expression of admiration on the face of Ancient One, who is always calm. The only person in the world who could truly admire her was Kyle. That's what top talent does. Strange smiled bitterly, and clenched his fists tightly. The remaining trace of pride was severely shattered, and he felt that there was no difference between himself, who used to be a genius, and a clown. I still have problems. Strange took a deep breath and said, Master Ancient One, since Mr. Kyle is so talented, why don't you pull him into Karma Taj? If you have him as a guardian, you can definitely. Before Strange finished speaking, the Ancient One interrupted him. Impossible. General Kyle has no destiny with Karma Taj. And even if I invite him, he will not join, Ancient Mage. But Strange looked at Gu Yi, and said bluntly, are you afraid? After hundreds of years, finally appeared, the only person beyond your cognition. Faced with things that people cannot control and understand, they often choose escape. Master Gu Yi trembled all over his body, with ripples in his eyes, and didn't say anything more. Chapter 496, Targeting Kyle. Inside mirror space, London. Faced with Strange's questioning words, Master Ancient One did not respond immediately. Her clean and fair face was as calm as ever. Facing the aftermath of the strong wind blowing this way, she quietly watched Kyle standing on the suspended platform 500 meters away, as if he was in control of everything. Master Gu Yi let out an inaudible sigh in his heart. Although he survived and practiced for hundreds of years, he peeped into the tip of the iceberg of the natural mysteries of the universe, and created Karma Taj, which is beyond the mundane. The worries and worries that can be the guardian of the earth have always lingered in my heart like endless rain. She is tired and tired. Obviously knowing that according to the rules and common sense, the safety of the earth cannot be guaranteed, and potential enemies such as Dormammu are beyond common sense and cognition. But when he saw Kyle, who was born out of nowhere during World War II, Master Guyi didn't feel that the burden on his shoulders was lightened, but instead deepened his concerns, so he kept observing Kyle secretly without getting in touch with him in depth. Perhaps, Strange really hit the mark. She has been afraid of Kyle, and it has never stopped since World War II. Every moment, every second, I wanted to win back, but that man went further and further away, until even catching up became an extravagant hope. Strange, Master Guyi seemed to have made a certain choice. His eyes became firm, and he asked lightly, "Do you know why I brought you here?" Why?" Strange scratched his head, looked at the battle situation hundreds of meters away, and guessed, "Come here, help." Just as Strange finished speaking, in the battle situation over there, skyscrapers roared and fell down in a regular manner. Several crescent slashes struck from the bottom of a toppled building, blasting open a hole that could accommodate people. General Deathblade got out of the building in a state of embarrassment. Its disheveled hair and black-gray cloak had long been tattered, and looked up to the sky with a ferocious face. "What is this? Don't you dare to fight me in close combat? You are afraid." General Deathblade's words hadn't finished yet, when a dazzling beam of light descended from the sky, swept across hundreds of meters in an instant, and arrived in front of it, almost ignoring the space distance. The pupils contracted subconsciously, and what was reflected in the eyes of General Deathblade was a human body with cool flames, dragging a trail of light, and a foot that was as fast as a streamer. "Have you ever been kicked by light?" These words faintly rang in his ears. General Deathblade didn't make any response, and the streamer's kick fell on it like a divine punishment. Not only was the speed too fast to be seen by the naked eye, but the impact contained in that kick was so great that it even exploded a large mass of air with a buzzing sound on the spot. Boom, bang, bang. General Deathblade flew upside down without any suspense, like a small stone floating in water, scraped the ground made up of buildings all the way, plowed a 50-meter-long trace, and finally rolled and hit the vertical building. The 10-story residential building collapsed, rumbling down. "That's Mr. Kyle? Good, so strong." Seeing this scene, Strange twitched the corners of his mouth far-fetchedly, and said with a wry smile of self-denial, "I just said something wrong. Don't say that I came to help in the war. With my current level, if even Mr. Kyle and the others can handle it, no, 10 of them will kill me if I come." Not participating in the battle, just watching the battle, Strange looked at Ancient One, waiting for her answer. The Ancient One mage looked back, gave him a look of understanding, and said calmly and firmly, "Strange, I brought you here because I want you to see with your own eyes the strength of the top powerhouses and potential enemies on Earth." Strange smiled wryly, spread his hands and said, "Now I have seen that the gap between them is like a chasm. Even if it is 100 meters away from the battle, the aftermath will be enough to kill me." Master Guyi said indifferently, "It's good to know the gap, but I'm afraid I don't even know the gap." "Know the gap? Recognize yourself. There is the possibility of catching up." "Master Guyi, what do you mean?" Strange's eyelids twitched, and he suddenly had an ominous premonition. "It's not obvious what I mean." The ancient mage looked away from Strange, and looked into the distance again. Kyle, whose whole body was burning with blazing flames, was as bright as the sun. "I want you to aim at that man and keep going until, so far as to surpass him, catch up, surpass, until the boundary of the mage is crossed." This is what the ancients entrusted to Strange. Beyond Mr. Kyle, Strange was completely speechless after hearing the words "in battle." Kyle's tall and straight perfect body, above the casual clothes, lingers with the dazzling flames of both sacredness and destruction. Withdrawing his raised left foot, Kyle's golden pupil showed surprise. The light-emitting kick just now did not hit the body, but the hard touched like steel. Obviously, it was blocked by the opponent in the end down. To know. The fastest kick in Kyle's double star form, once kicked the Nova Legion Skynet defense, and kicked the starship of the Carry civilization. "It's getting more and more interesting to be able to block that kick." Kyle raised the corner of his mouth slightly, showing a devilish playful smile 50 meters away, in the ruins caused by the collapse of residential buildings. First, a black sickle flew out of it, and General Deathblade held the handle tightly with one hand, and with the help of the flying sickle, he pulled out his bared body. General Deathblade gasped for breath, and spit out a mouthful of blood with a wow. It looked up in shock, looking at the shining Kyle in front of it. Compared to Kyle's astonishment, General Deathblade was even more shocked. "It's so fast, so amazing. His aura has completely changed, and he is completely different from before. General Deathblade's face was very ugly, and he thought that the opponent was not good at melee combat, but it couldn't react to the kick just now. If it wasn't for the Guardian of the Deathblade and Sickle, he would have blocked the light kick in time and buffered most of the impact force, and he might not have died or been disabled under that kick. The sickle weapon in the hands of General Deathblade, in addition to various rare materials in the universe, was also injected with half of his own soul when forging, so the sickle has soul consciousness, and can cut the souls of others in battle. In other words, the Deathblade General is not stronger than himself, but the Deathblade side it holds, which is one with itself. It's dangerous. Close combat with that man is very dangerous. Fear was deeply rooted in his heart, and General Deathblade quickly realized this. The speed of the opponent's movement is comparable to the speed of light, and the strength of kicking is not an exaggeration to call it a meteorite impact. Facing this kind of human whose speed and strength have reached the peak, it is very likely that they will not even know how to die in close combat. By the way, is the other party really human? General Deathblade almost doubts life, which has subverted its cognition. Shouldn't human beings be low-level creatures with weak limbs? Why is this man in front of him even more of a monster than a monster? Chapter 497 Three-Party War Situation. Decide the winner. I'm going to continue. In the double star form, Kyle tapped the ground with his toes, and his body was light and floating. Floating up 10 meters in the air, he seemed to replace the sun. His whole body was burning with dazzling brilliance, and the air around him was slightly distorted and trembling. This amazing deterrent pressure, even if it is 500 meters away, Strange can empathize with General Deathblade. Strange's mouth was dry, and he said bitterly, "Master Ancient One, you were joking just now, right? If you want me to surpass Mr. Kyle, how is this possible? With Kyle's current height, even catching up is an extravagant hope, let alone going beyond. Do I look like a joker?" Ancient One glanced at him, and said lightly, "Don't worry. I don't want you to defeat him. As long as you surpass him in the field of magic, it's just about spell attainment. It's also difficult." Strange was frowning, wondering if it was the Ancient One who had put some kind of obsession on him, which made him inexplicably feel like a huge burden was on his shoulders. "Strange. You may be the best among us. If even you can't surpass that man, then no one in the world can surpass him." Master Guyi secretly sighed in his heart, but did not say it clearly, and continued to pay attention to the battle situation in the mirror world. In the main battlefield, facing Kyle in the double star form, General Deathblade, who had suffered a dark loss, did not dare to fight head-to-head, but threw the Deathblade sickle forward in his hand. As soon as the sickle was released from his hand, it immediately spun at a high speed, like a black moon, sharply tearing through the air, driving a strong wind, and flew towards Kyle in mid-air at high speed. Kyle raised his eyebrows and blasted out a beam of high-energy light cannon, but was cut in half by the sickle, and the chaotic energy exploded in the low air. The speed of the Deathblade scythe did not decrease sharply, but instead continued to accelerate and slash towards him. Without the grip of General Deathblade, the Deathblade scythe seemed to break free from its shackles. Both its speed and chopping power were several times higher than before. Interesting, Kyle had never fought with a weapon before. When he saw the scythe coming, he couldn't help but open his hands. The moment before the scythe hit his chest, his palms closed like lightning, accurately grasping the slightly curved sharp blade. Empty into the Deathblade. The 2-meter-long sickle was still trembling and whistling in Kyle's hands. Not only was he not afraid of the energy of the double stars, but he was also not at a disadvantage under the strength at the same time. There was also an invisible slash, ignoring Kyle's physical defense, and slashed silently on his inner soul body. Cut. General Deathblade on the ground looked happy, but a few seconds later, Kyle continued to wrestle with his scythe in the air as if nothing had happened. "What's going on? Just now, I felt that he was clearly beheaded. Why didn't it work?" General Deathblade is a bit confused. Countless powerful alien enemies have also suffered from soul slashes that he can't see. Once the Deathblade sickle hits the soul body, the creature itself will be killed on the spot if it is heavy, or it will lose consciousness for a short time, and within a short period of time of losing consciousness, the Deathblade sickle is enough to cut off the opponent's head. But this rule, falling on the human youth in front of him, doesn't work anymore. Of course, General Deathblade didn't know that Kyle, as a reborn traverser, had an extraordinary soul and body. Although Kyle once split half into a Superman clone, but the strong soul foundation, After successively tempering the original stone and mana mysteriously, the soul body has already reached a peak value. If the soul of an ordinary creature is a weak candle, then Kyle's soul is an endless torch. The soul slash just now did hit Kyle's soul body, but it was quite painless at all. Above the air. Nice power. A look of astonishment appeared on Kyle's face, his tiger's mouth shook violently, and he couldn't hold back the sickle. He took the initiative to send his hands to the side, and the Deathblade sickle flew out immediately. It is also the first time that a weapon can fight against him in double star form. The sickle is still spinning, like a boomerang, targeting Kyle, and turning back for a new round of slashing. General Deathblade sneered, "As long as you are targeted by Deathblade, you will be hunted down to the end of the universe until your head is beheaded, then I'll try." Kyle shrugged, accelerated his flight, and turned into a colorful streamer, and the sickle also turned into a gray streamer, chasing after him. The two started a chase scene over the London city in the mirror space. No matter where Kyle flies, the sickle will chase after him, and the speed is not much slower than the speed of light. Within 10 seconds, twin star Kyle and Deathblade Scythe circled more than 10 times in the city of London until Kyle returned to the center of the city from the edge of the London city, and then swooped down all the way, with a Deathblade Scythe hanging tightly behind him about 3 meters. The last moment. Kyle turned back like lightning, dragging the trajectory of the light arc, and rushed towards the Deathblade General on the ground without warning, and quickly avoided it when he came to it. General Deathblade only felt a blur in front of his eyes, and the dazzling light flash past, and then what was reflected in his eyes was the Deathblade sickle fused with his own soul, slashing towards it continuously. In the nick of time, the Deathblade Scythe flashed to the side at a high speed, narrowly avoiding the body of General Deathblade, only wiped a shocking bloodstain on its arm, and continued to chase Kyle behind. "It's dangerous. I was almost killed by my own weapon." General Deathblade swallowed his saliva with lingering fear. At this moment, it saw a little spark rotating into a wheel about 1 meter in front of it, and a circular hole opened from large to small. "This is..." General Deathblade opened his eyes wide in surprise, and then, a gray streamer flew out from the portal again. The gray streamer sank into General Deathblade's chest without any suspense, pierced through his belly, and flew out from behind with a lot of blood. "Call out." The gray streamer suddenly stopped, and it was stuck on the ground slanting downwards. The black and gray background color, the crescent-like blade, is not a Deathblade sickle. Why did it appear in front? All this happened so suddenly. General Deathblade's face was full of disbelief. He looked down at his chest with a big hole, and looked back, and saw the first one floating 10 meters behind him, exactly the same as the one in front of him. 2 portals. It turned out that it wasn't almost. General Deathblade smiled miserably, spat out a mouthful of blood, and then fell straight to the ground, losing all signs of life very quickly. Victory and defeat. "I didn't expect it." Kyle landed lightly, and with a wave of his hand, released the 2 connected portals. He looked at the corpse of General Deathblade on the ground, shook his head indifferently and said, "A weapon is a weapon after all, and the truth is only when you are strong alone. It is true that you can remotely manipulate the sickle to attack without taking any risks, but even a 10-year-old child knows that once the weapon is out of the body becomes the biggest weakness." From the moment General Deathblade chose to give up the close fight with Kyle, it had already lost. Chapter 498. The end of the battle in London. Inside the parallel mirror space in London, the second battlefield between Iron Man and Proxima Centauri. Although the intensity of the battle here is not as intense as that of Kyle, it also covers the urban area within 100 meters. The buildings, streets and roads are all scorched black after being ravaged by shells, and there are flames burning everywhere, thick and thorny. The black smoke from the nostrils rises upwards. Pata. An Iron Man with severe scratches on the surface of the golden red paint fell from the sky, fell naturally, and finally fell directly into the ruins formed by the collapsed house. It was barely enough to stop. Most of the mask on the front of Iron Man's head has been damaged, revealing the mature and resolute face of the inner Tony. He lay down on the rubble and broken tiles, panting continuously. The limbs protected by the steel armor had signs of damage from being pierced by spears, and the scrapped state was constantly entwined with white electric light. Tread. A vigorous dark purple figure jumped down and landed lightly in front of Tony. It was Proxima Centauri who was fighting with him. Darky Proxima is holding a black spear. The original alien uniform is scorched and messy, with blood on the corner of his mouth. Obviously this battle was not easy for it, but it still stood to the end. Wiping off the blood from the corner of his mouth, Proxima Centauri took a catwalk forward, the tip of his spear gleaming with coquettish purple light, coldly looked down at Tony lying on the ground, and said coldly, "It can't be done. No matter biological or technological product, as long as if the spear strikes, the inner nervous system will be damaged and scrapped. Now that the steel armor on your limbs is all scrapped, how can you still fight me?" Tony didn't respond to Proxima Centauri, nor did he take off his steel armor, but panted heavily to himself, fighting for even a second. "Oh? Are you still waiting for the end of the battle over there? Don't fantasize, General Deathblade can be ranked among the top 3 among us. There are countless starry sky powerhouses who died under his Deathblade, and that human man is no exception." Darky Proxima sneered again and again, raising the spear in his hand, about to give Tony the final blow. But suddenly, Proxima Centauri shuddered all over, and looked sideways in one direction, with an expression of disbelief on his face, and a little panic glowed from it. "How is it? The battle over there has been decided." Tony was determined, looked at Proxima Centauri, with a tense and serious face, and smiled slightly. "Let me guess, my godfather should have won, right? Shut up. Shut up, you native of the Earth." The hand of Proxima Centauri holding up the spear was still shaking, and he shouted nervously. The breath of General Deathblade disappeared, and the connection with it was completely severed in an instant, but the aura of that human man still exists, and it is so powerful that it is difficult to describe it in words. These messages all show one point: General Deathblade, who had fought under the Lord of the Tyrant for many years, died and was defeated by the indigenous humans of the mere wild planet. How is this possible? How is it possible? Darky Proxima Centauri muttered to himself, unable to accept the fact before him. Tony continued, "You may not know that among us, the Godfather is the absolute number 1. And he has not lost a single game for decades." "Shut up. I said it, shut up." And Proxima's face became more ferocious, and he almost lost his mind in anger. He looked down at Tony again, and raised the spear in his hand to the top of his head. "Even if you win, so what? You will die here." As soon as Proxima Centauri finished speaking, without any hesitation, he slammed down the spear in his hand and inserted it into the glowing chest of Tony's steel suit, which was the Krypton gold energy core that provided the entire suit. "This is the moment, Jarvis," Tony yelled suddenly. "Yes, sir." Accompanied by Jarvis's words, the steel suit suddenly disassembled and spread apart from Tony's body. Tony made a hasty tactical roll, just in time to avoid the fatal blow of Proxima Centauri's spear. "Want to run?" The spear plunged into the ground, Proxima and his pupils contracted, and he was about to pursue Tony. But at this moment, those parts of the steel suit scattered all over the place accelerated towards it one after another, and they were automatically put on Proxima Centauri. Proxima and Yi was taken aback, but couldn't shake off the parts of the suit. In just half a second, his body was already wrapped by the damaged steel suit. Dark Knight Proxima Centauri looked at Tony next to him, and found that Tony had got up from the ground, and gave it a weird smile. Tony didn't give him a chance to react, and quickly issued a command: "Jarvis, explode the Mark, AK model. What do you want to do?" "Let me go." The energy core on the chest flickered with dazzling light, and Proxima Centauri had an ominous premonition in his heart, and he couldn't help screaming loudly. "Teach you a truth. You don't know who will win until the last second." Tony waved at Proxima Dark Knight and fell back the next moment. Amidst Proxima Centauri's desperate screams, the steel suit on his body activated the self-destruct mode. Hearing a boom, the battle suit and the person turned into fireballs together. Parts and pieces of meat exploded to the side, and the aftermath of the impact pushed Tony, who was a few meters away, 10 meters away. Cough cough. Tony struggled to get up from the ground, and when he confirmed that only the spear was left on the scorched earth, he let out a long sigh of relief, followed his body and fell to the ground tiredly, showing a relieved expression. In the second round, Iron Man Tony narrowly won. The other side. In the central square of London in the real world, the vision of the gathering of celestial bodies in the sky is coming to an end, accompanied by a blur of light and shadow. The Earth, London and the dark world are once again ambiguously connected. A cold wind blew past. Next to the fountain in the originally empty square, the figure of Malekith gradually emerged. It knelt on the ground, its body twitched and trembled, the red ether energy continuously escaped and dissipated from the surface of its body, and its unparalleled momentum and vitality continued to flow plummeted. "How come, my power?" Malekith's eyes were dull, and he reached out his hand to catch the escaped ether energy, but the red mist still passed through his fingers. Another gust of wind blows. In the square area in front of Malekith, a red cloak appeared, and then Thor's hammer, silver armor, rough and frantic blonde hair. Thor, with a stern face, appeared in the square, holding Thor's hammer and walking towards Malekith. Sol looked at the red energy dissipating from Malekith, and said in a deep voice, "My father once said, never rely too much on external objects and third-party forces. Only a strong heart can be truly powerful. You relying on the received power, let alone defeating Kyle, you can't even defeat me. What's more, the ether particles are not in your body, it's just the residual energy given to you by others, and it will be gone after it is used up." Thor came to Malekith and raised Thor's hammer. The thunder and lightning wrapped around his arm and the end of the hammer, and the strong wind blew his blonde hair to become more wild and domineering. Malekith stayed where he was in a daze. He had already given up resisting, lost in the power of the dominant level just now and couldn't extricate himself. "Go to hell and repent." Thor decisively swung the hammer down, bringing down a bolt of lightning, like a divine punishment, killing the dark elf leader Malekith to the ground. Chapter 499 Howard and Number 039, S Invitation. Sky over the city of London. The reflections of the 8 overlapping worlds began to be disillusioned one after another, and the dark clouds rolled over, and the vision of the gathering of celestial bodies finally came to an end. Following a burst of terrifying lightning and thunder, large raindrops fell one after another, washing away the post-war scars of gunpowder in the city of London. Thor, holding the bloody Thor's hammer tightly, stood in the square where the rain was pouring, looked down at Malekith's body on the ground. His chest was still heaving and panting violently. "Mother, I avenged you, but so what if you kill the enemy? The dead will never come back." Sol's face was full of sadness. He raised his head and looked at the sky. The rain was pouring from his head to his feet, and he couldn't tell whether it was water or tears on his face. Standing in a daze for a long time, Sol suddenly heard a familiar call from behind. "Sol, Sol." Sol looked back, and it was his girlfriend, Jane, who was running towards this side in the heavy rain, and jumped into his broad and strong chest with a last leap. Sol hugged each other back, and the love was so deep that the two embraced and kissed after the passion. Sol looked down at Jane and asked curiously, "Jane, why are you here?" "Me." Simply speaking, she was abducted by her younger brother Loki, and after staying on a certain planet for an hour, Loki sent her back to London on Earth. Loki, Thor frowned, remembering the ether particles, and asked, "Did he do anything to you?" "No." Jane shook her head lightly, remembering Loki's look of excitement and joy when he sent her back. She couldn't help thinking, "I am not an important role to him. He seems to have achieved a certain purpose in the end, so I don't care about it, then force me to stay, and send me back here directly." "Have you achieved a certain purpose?" "That bastard, what are you planning?" Although Sol said so, he will never hate Loki, but maintains the attitude of a brother who hates iron and steel. Sol thought for a while, and said to Jane, "Jane, you can stay on Earth. With Kyle here, you will be safe. I will go back to God's domain and report the situation to my father." Jane nodded in agreement, and sighed inwardly. The two of them should be in the most distant relationship, not one of them. After a beam of light from the rainbow bridge fell from the sky, Sol turned into the body of Malekith and disappeared in the central square of London City at the same time in the mirror space. Go back and practice hard. The distance between you and them is still not in the same dimension." Master Guya drew a circle with his right hand, made a seal, opened the portal to the outside world, and left the mirror space first. Strange nodded with deep understanding, and he finally looked back at the alien warship that crashed into the city, ravaging the mirror world of London in ruins. If this is not a mirror space, the damage caused by the battle would not be much better than that in New York City last time. "Can I really catch up with them?" Strange muttered to himself, without thinking too much, followed closely by the ancient mage, and both disappeared into the portal. Mirrored space of London City. Tony was lying on the scorched ground, panting heavily, and under the sound of rustling, a tall and straight figure came to him and stretched out his palm towards him. "Godfather." Tony barely opened his eyes. Saw the person coming, couldn't help smiling, and stretched out his hand to hold Kyle's hand. Kyle pulled Tony up from the ground, patted him on the shoulder, and said with a faint smile, "It's a good performance this time. I was the one who was almost killed." Tony smiled bitterly, looked at the spear inserted into the ground, and said with lingering fear, "Are all Thanos men so strong?" "Thanos will be stronger." With a calm face, Kyle said meaningfully. Don't take it lightly. Try to arm yourself. This protracted war has just begun. Although Kyle and Thanos have not met yet, they both have infinite rough stones, or information about infinite rough stones. And one of their ultimate goals is to gather 6 infinite rough stones. The previous Earth New York and the galactic carry Star Wars are just small sparks created by friction. Last time, 2 people from Kyle's camp were taken away by Thanos' men. This time, Kyle and Tony killed 2 generals from Thanos' camp. It's a temporary tie. The competition for gems between Kyle and Thanos will become bigger and bigger, and the Master will start a full-scale war at the end, and there will be no end to death. I already smell gunpowder, and have taken some precautions. Tony nodded and was about to say something when a pleasant cell phone rang suddenly in his trouser pocket. Tony took out his phone subconsciously, and when he saw the little pepper note on the screen, he looked at Kyle with a little surprise. Isn't this mirror world an independent and closed world? How can there be calls coming in? Kyle smiled faintly and said, someone opened the portal to the outside, temporarily connecting the 2 realms. Tony didn't have time to ask who it was, and was urged by the phone's ringtone to connect to the incoming call. Pepper's anxious voice immediately came from the phone. Tony, where have you been? Why can't you get through the phone? Are you okay? Of course I'm fine. The matter has been dealt with. The Godfather is also beside me. What can I do? Tony held back the pain and pretended to be relaxed. Little Pepper continued, that's good, let me tell you. Tony listened and nodded in agreement. After hanging up the phone, he took a long breath and said to Kyle, Godfather, Pepper asked me to go back to dinner with you tonight. Before Kyle responded, Tony quickly added, this is my father's invitation. He said, there's something I want to tell you by the way. Oh? Howard. Kyle raised his eyebrows unexpectedly, thinking about it. Since he returned to Earth from the Galactic Federation, he has never seen Howard again, so he simply agreed, okay, the matter is over anyway. Saul's own business is my business. I'm too lazy to participate too much. Let the Carl family and S.H.I.E.L.D. handle the back end on the London side. Let's have a celebration banquet and go back and have a good drink. Tony quickly said, no problem. The next thing is simple. On the one hand, Kyle contacted Heimdall and asked him to search for the lost Whis in the Dark World, and on the other hand, he contacted Yutong and asked her to send members of the Carl family to the Mirror World to clear up the war situation. As for the London area in the real world, it was Tony who contacted Fury and asked him to send S.H.I.E.L.D. agents to clean up the rear end. That afternoon, various news channels are still frantically broadcasting follow-up reports about the sensational news about peace symbol Kyle, Iron Man Tony, and Thor appearing in the city of London to fight the alien invaders. As a result, there was an uproar all over the world, and it was upgraded to Hot Topic, which aroused heated discussions among the people. That night, Kyle and Tony have changed into tuxedo suits, brought Lucy and Pepper respectively, and at the invitation of Howard, came to have dinner at the lakeside villa in the outskirts of New York. Chapter 500 First Generation Ant-Man, Pym Particles. The lakeside villa on the outskirts of New York. This is Tony, according to Howard's request, selected and purchased a retirement home for him. Next to the 2-story wooden villa, there are beautiful forest lakes, and there are few people around. When Kyle came here in Tony's car, he couldn't believe for a while that Frankenstein like Howard, even on the wild planet of the Galactic Federation, built him a technological protection building with garbage and returned to Earth. But live in this simple house of ordinary people. When entering the villa, Kyle was even more surprised when he saw Howard sitting in the old man's chair in the hall and reading a book with reading glasses. At this time, Howard was much older than 4 months ago. His hair was all pale, and the skin on his face was dry and wrinkled, full of vicissitudes imprinted by the knife of time. Lucy also covered her mouth in disbelief, and blurted out, Howard, why don't you use the infinite formula to slow down aging? You, Lucy? Kyle waved his hand in time, interrupted Lucy's words, took a few steps forward alone, and looked down at Howard who was sitting in the chair. Although Howard is as old as an 80-year-old man, he is still conscious. Looking up at Kyle, he took off his presbyopic glasses, put down his hands to study the books, and said softly, Patriarch, you are here? Kyle scolded with a smile, Howard, you guy, you have always been out of order. Your brain is not working, and you didn't use the infinite formula, and you didn't ask me for a natural lifespan. Howard smiled, knowing in his heart that the Patriarch is omnipotent. Even if he wants to live forever, the Patriarch can do it. But he doesn't need that kind of thing anymore. Homeowner. Howard smiled slightly and said, I used to think that scientific research was everything to me, so I was always afraid of dying one day, fearing that I would never be able to study again, and would not be able to see the scientific crystallization of wisdom in future generations. But until I joined the Carl family, after having Tony again, I gradually realized the importance of family. Howard paused, and continued, during those days of wandering in the starry sky, I saw the beauty of science all over. Now that my family is together, I have nothing to regret in my life. Tony is better than Blue again, and inherited Stark Industry. I can rest and retire with complete peace of mind. Tony and Potts at the door held hands, leaned together and looked at Howard happily. I see. If that's what you want, then I have nothing more to say. Kyle nodded, respecting Howard's choice. It can be seen that Howard is really tired. From the battlefield of World War II to the battlefield of the galaxy, he has been silently paying behind his back. Now that he is silently disappearing from the world, there is nothing wrong with it. It's just that there are fewer and fewer acquaintances of the same age, which makes Kyle feel a little lost if one day, even Captain America Steve, Thor, and the Supreme Mage Guyi are no longer in the world, then maybe the world will really be silent. Howard raised his cloudy eyes, coughed lightly, and said, Tony, Potts, you guys go to the second floor first and prepare dinner. I have something to talk to Patriarch Kyle alone, okay? Tony nodded immediately. Luzai, let's go up to the second floor together. Paz leaned over and took Luzai's arm, smiling. Okay, Lucy followed Potts obediently, and went up to the second floor with Tony, leaving the hall space to Howard and Kyle. Kyle was also polite, as if he was at home. He came to the sofa facing the chair, sat down with his legs crossed. If you have anything to say between you and me, just talk about it, it is good. Howard nodded, and said straight to the point, have you heard of Hank Pym? Pym. There was a gleam in Kyle's eyes, and he never thought that this name would come out of Howard's mouth. Howard recalled the past and stated, Hank is a very outstanding scientist, and his wisdom is not inferior to mine. After you left the Earth at the end of World War II, Hank Pym joined S.H.I.E.L.D. as a soldier and scientist. Worked with me for a period of time, he invented an item, and even now, I am still shocked by it, and it is difficult to surpass it after half a lifetime of research. What's that? Kyle asked, pretending not to understand. Pym particles. Howard took a deep breath and said, it is an important technology that can expand and contract at will. Hank also mastered the method of controlling ants, and created the Ant-Man suit with Pym technology. He once and his wife, the incarnation as Ant-Man, agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., protecting the world in the midst of the transition between the old century and the new, Kyle said calmly, and then, as far as I know, S.H.I.E.L.D. does not have Ant-Man. Yes. I also returned to Earth, and I only found out after asking someone to investigate. Howard turned around slowly, took out a document bag from his back, took out a file and put it on the table, and in front of him was an old man with white temples and glasses. Hank Pym is here before I leave after the Earth. In a special operation in 1975, his wife was judged to be dead because his wife became smaller and sneaked into it in order to prevent the explosion of nuclear weapons. Hank fell out with S.H.I.E.L.D. and hid the Pym technology he invented, so it was never known. Kyle picked up Hank Pym's personal file and flipped through the pages. The content was similar to what he asked Yutong to send someone to investigate. Howard continued, later, Hank, opened a company called Pym Technology, but he did not openly explore the core technology of Pym particles, but invested in technology and engineering. He has retired for several years until today. Pym particles have also disappeared from the world for decades. Kyle put down the file and looked at Howard. Then you mention it now. You want me to? Howard looked a little excited, and said, Master, Pym particles are no less than infinite energy, steel suits, and artificial intelligence. If we can make reasonable use of Pym particle technology, we will definitely be able to make the current stage technological civilization has been raised to a higher level. Kyle nodded in agreement, narrowed his eyes and said, I understand what you mean. If possible, it's best to bring Hank Pym into the Carl family. Otherwise, at least master the Pym particle technology. Howard nodded solemnly. He also felt a little indebted to Hank Pym, and wanted to make up for it no matter what. In fact, previously, Kyle had conducted a series of investigations and plans on Ant-Man and Pym technology, but first focused on Doctor Strange and Little Spider, and happened to be attacked by dark elves in God's domain, which led to he didn't have time to do it. But now, since Howard specifically mentioned that the matter on God's domain has just been resolved, He can try to contact Ant-Man on the ground. Leave this to me, Kyle smiled faintly, already having an idea in his mind. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.